Chapter 1. Chu Yin felt a dull pain in her head and heard noises coming from afar. She didn't know whether it was a kacha or a kaikai sound. She woke up slowly. She was tired from taking photos just now, so she lay on the dressing table in the studio and took a nap for a while. It seemed that she had slept for a long time. Otherwise, why would her mother look so worried? However, Chu Yin didn't miss her mother's face. While this makeup artist was really good, the crow's feet and the freckles at the tip of her nose were all gone. What's more, her mother in the ancient costume actually looked gentle and virtuous. The coupons she got from her best friend were not in vain. Ignoring the inexplicable pain in her head, Chu Yin grinned at her beautiful mother in front of her. Finished? Is it my turn now? Kaikai, you're awake? The two of them spoke at the same time. Chu Yan's ears twitched. She didn't hear what she said clearly, but she still nodded. I'm awake. Hey mom, why are you crying? As soon as her voice fell, the weak mother in front of her actually burst into tears and began to cry. This simply subverted her usual image of a strong woman who would do whatever she said. The change came so fast that Chu Yin didn't have time to react. Dang dang. There was a sound of footsteps. Chu Yin was just about to turn her head when a face suddenly squeezed in front of her. Kaikai, you're awake. The enlarged face and the deafening shout made Chu Yin, who was close by, shrink back in fright. She pressed her hand against her thumping heart and looked at the person who suddenly jumped in front of her in a complaining tone. Dad, why did you suddenly scare me? She saw that her mother, who was about to cry, immediately pulled her father, who had been in front of her daughter, to the side and softly scolded. Yuan Lang, Kaikai just woke up. Don't scare her. Chu Yin was stunned. Did she hear it wrong? Yuan Lang? Kaikai. What did this mean? What made Chu Yin even more stunned was that her father actually stood aside obediently, like a child who had done something wrong, listening to the adult's scolding. He even muttered from time to time. Kaikai has been asleep for 2 days. I miss her. I didn't mean it just now, Kaikai. What was going on? Could it be that this artistic portrait had turned into a video? His smart and capable mother played the role of a weak and virtuous woman, while his burly and stocky father played the role of a submissive and foolish man. No, the straw mat beneath him, the patched quilt, and the leaky roof. It didn't seem fake. Thinking of this, a large amount of memories flooded his mind, immediately drowning out his thoughts at this time. A gentle breeze blew across the villa. The sky was clear and the air was fresh. A little girl about 10 years old was sitting on a big rock in front of the house with a blank look on her face. Beside her sat a tall and strong man with a face as clear as jade. He imitated the young lady beside him and rested his chin on his hands, sighing from time to time. Their expressions were the same, their movements were the same, and they were imitated to perfection. However, when these actions were done by a young man in his 20s, they were very comical. Chu Yin noticed the actions of the people around her and could not help but burst into laughter. This laughter pulled at the wound on her head, and her smile immediately turned into a grimace. The man immediately put down his hand and cupped her face. He pouted and moved closer to her. Kaikai, blow on it. Blow on it, and it won't hurt anymore. Chu Yin looked at the anxious expression of the man in front of her, and her eyes immediately turned red. She seemed to be unable to feel the pain. She pulled down his hand and sighed. It doesn't hurt anymore, Dad. It was only at this moment that Chu Yin completely accepted the fact that her soul had crossed over. Chu Qingyan, nicknamed Kaikai, was the name of her current body. She was 10 years old this year and looked exactly like her childhood self. However, this body was sallow and skinny, obviously malnourished. The man in front of her with a confused and worried expression was her father, Chu Huayuan. He was 25 or 26 years old. In her memory, he used to be a general, but 10 years ago, he was defeated and his entire army was wiped out. When she found him, he had already lost his mind and became ignorant of the ways of the world. The woman washing clothes not far away was her mother, Miao Danxian. In her memory, she was a well-bred young lady who was proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. After marrying her father, the two of them were in harmony. However, there was a sudden change. Her husband was accused of neglecting his duties, and the family was abandoned by the family. Her weak mother brought her foolish husband and 2-month-old child to this place, and struggled to survive. She went from being a rich young lady, who did not do any household chores, to a laundress in a rich family's mansion, all day long to support her family. In a flash, 10 years had passed. Chu Qingyan sighed heavily. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she wouldn't have believed that her mother, an elite white-collar worker, would become a washerwoman, and her father, a special forces soldier, would become an idiot. Just a few days ago, the original body of her body had an argument with the children from the same village. When the children saw that they could not win against her, they threw stones at the original body. The bowl-sized stones hit her head, and in an instant blood flowed out. The original body of her body fainted. She had been judged to be dead by the doctor, and was sleeping with her eyes closed, but she had transmigrated just like that. She thought that if she had not asked her parents to take artistic photos during the New Year holiday, she would not have seen such a horrifying scene when she woke up. Forget it. Since she was here, she should take things as they came. Moreover, her parents were still her parents. Although there were some mistakes, they were still her parents. Maybe God felt that her parents did not have much time to accompany her for so many years, so he let her and her family transmigrate to the past and enjoy the happiness of a family reunion. Although the happiness of a family reunion seemed a little sad, she was not in a hurry. With her brain as a 21st century college student, she did not believe that she could not handle the legendary farming life. Chu Qingyan looked at herself with short arms and short legs. Her body was a little weak, but as long as she took good care of herself, she could still make a name for herself. Thus, Chu Qingyan stood up, clenched her fists, and made a beautiful gesture in the air. She believed that she would definitely bring her beautiful mother and adorable father to a blissful and well-off life. At this moment, a mournful voice came from afar. Kai, your father is chasing my chickens and ducks again. Kai? It seemed to be calling her. Chu Qingyan stiffened her neck and turned to the right. She saw an ant in plain clothes wailing at her. She looked in the direction where she was screaming. Her adorable father was chasing other people's chickens and ducks all over the field happily. A burst of heroic and impassioned blood suddenly choked in her chest. It was like dreams were really plentiful, but reality was really skinny. It was just that now was not the time to think about a beautiful future. The most important thing now was to chase after her father, who was chasing other people's chickens and ducks. Dad, come back. Chu Qingyan took big steps and wanted to cry but had no tears. She tiredly chased after her father. So there was this scene in the field. Chu Qingyan's father was chasing chickens and ducks, and Chu Qingyan was chasing after her father. The dogs were barking, and the chickens were crowing. The men were carrying hoes and working in the field, and the women were holding dustpans and standing at the door. Looking at this scene, they could not help but smile from ear to ear. It was very lively for a moment. Chapter 2. On the third day since she arrived in ancient times, Chu Qingyan finally understood what it meant to learn from experience. It was good to have ideas, but it was difficult to put them into action. What hybrid rice? What king of desserts? What father of architecture? Dream on. Chu Qingyan had thought that it would be easy to get rich with her own hands. However, when she saw that her hands were weak due to malnutrition, Chu Qingyan felt defeated. Without conditions and money, it was still a problem to fill her stomach. Chu Qingyan rubbed her stomach. She seemed to be hungry again. There was almost no food to eat at home. It was good enough that she could eat a bowl of porridge with a few grains of rice every day. The four walls of the house were bare. The degree of poverty was beyond her imagination. Just as Chu Qingyan was sighing, a dirty steamed bun appeared in front of her. She was stunned. She couldn't help looking up at the steamed bun, only to see her father smiling brightly at her. Father, where did you get this? Chu Qingyan's heart tightened. Could it be that her father stole someone else's things again? Chu Qingyan couldn't be blamed for thinking that way. In the past 3 days, she had been cleaning up after her father every day. If she wasn't bumping into the clothes rack in the west, she was chasing the dog in the east. It was a pity that she had to wander around the village with her father before she recovered from her injuries. She had to stay by her father's side all the time. Otherwise, The money her mother earned from washing other people's clothes wouldn't be enough to compensate for the losses. Chu Qingyan's father chuckled. Antigua gave it to me. You wouldn't tell Kai Kai that he begged for it from her kitchen. Otherwise Kai Kai would be angry. Chu Qingyan looked at the steamed bun that had rolled on the ground a few times. Her heart was filled with warmth. She looked up and asked, "Did you eat it, father?" "I ate one." Chu Qingyan's father looked at her and swallowed. He then turned his head away and said in a low voice, "One look at Chu Qingyan," and she knew that her father couldn't bear to give it to her. She took it with tears in her eyes and broke the steamed bun in half. "Father here." Chu Machen's father happily took it and took a big bite. Seeing this, Chu Qingyan also took a bite. No matter how dirty the steamed bun was, it still tasted sweet in her mouth. A friend in need was a friend indeed. Her father had never forgotten his love for her, no matter if he was in the modern era or in the present era. After sharing the steamed buns, Chu Qingyan felt a little stronger. She patted the dust off her body and said to her father, "Mother went to do something. Let's go to the mountain to pick up some firewood." This was the only thing she could think of to help her mother. Seeing her father jumping around in front of her, Chu Qingyan smiled and carried the bamboo basket on her back. She thought that if she was lucky, she might be able to dig up some wild vegetables and mushrooms. Then tonight's dinner would be settled. Fortunately, he had participated in wilderness survival training during the summer vacation, which came in handy at this time. The spring rain had just passed, and it was the time for mushrooms to grow. After careful identification, Chu Qingyan picked the non-poisonous mushrooms and put them in the bamboo basket. Then she dug up some wild vegetables. After half a day, the bamboo basket was almost full. She happily wiped her sweat and then straightened up to look at her father, who was not far away. She saw him jumping up and down, picking up a lot of firewood for her, and throwing it haphazardly on the ground. Later, she would let her father carry the bamboo basket while she carried the firewood. Then they could go home. Chu Qingyan walked briskly towards her father, but halfway there, she heard her father suddenly shout, "Kai Kai, I found a big black firewood." "Big black firewood?" Puzzled, Chu Qingyan quickened her pace and ran over. Soon, she saw the big black firewood that her father was talking about. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. "Father, this isn't a big black firewood. It's a person." "A person?" Chu Qingyan's father immediately walked over to his daughter, feeling wronged. "Then why is he lying here and pretending to be a big black firewood to lie to me?" Chu Qingyan looked at the motionless person lying on the grass and felt a little apprehensive. She had talked to her father for a while, but he didn't move. Chu Qingyan was a little uneasy, not knowing if this person was dead or alive. She wanted to go forward and take a look, but she saw that this person was wearing a black, round-neck silk robe. His wrists were blue, and his waist was wrapped with a vermilion belt inlaid with white jade. The golden and purple patterns on the robe were all handmade and looked very exquisite. Just by looking at the way he was dressed, one could tell that he was either rich or respectable. However, when such a person suddenly appeared in this shabby little village, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but be wary. She didn't want to get into trouble and kick the bucket right after she transmigrated here. Thus, Chu Qingyan pulled at her father, who was circling the big black firewood, and planned to turn and leave. Chu Qingyan's father turned to look at his daughter and asked, "Kai Kai, Dan Young said to cover oneself with a blanket when sleeping. Otherwise, it's easy to catch a cold. Big black firewood is sleeping here. Can I bring some clothes to cover him?" Chu Qingyan looked at her father's patched-up clothes, and then looked at the other person's luxurious clothes. She sighed inwardly. Perhaps her father's clothes weren't even worthy of wiping his hands in the other person's eyes. However, she still stopped in her tracks and turned around, resigned to her fate. She couldn't not help an old man fall, just because of a certain case. After all, this was a human life. She couldn't sit by and do nothing. If it was really like Dongua meeting a wolf, then she could only consider herself unlucky. "Father, help me turn him over. I want to see if he's still alive." Chu Qingyan felt that he seemed to still be breathing, but she was small and weak and couldn't move this long-limbed man. Chu Qingyan's father immediately ran over to help, but he used too much strength, and the man fell to the ground. Chu Qingyan coughed softly, She had forgotten to ask her father to use less strength. She really felt sorry for this big black firewood. However, when she looked at the man on the ground, she realized that his face seemed to have been painted. His entire face was dark purple, and it was a completely different color from his fair neck. However, she could see that his facial features were well defined and cold. He had thick eyebrows, a high nose bridge and beautiful lips. Overall, he gave off a cold and hard feeling. Chu Qingyan thought that if he was in her anime and manga club, he would look like a charming purple elf. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. Chu Qingyan reached out to check his breathing. His breathing was long and steady. He was still alive. There didn't seem to be any other wounds on his body. His physical characteristics were normal, as if he was asleep. However, she knew that wasn't the case. No normal person would be unaffected after the torment just now. At this moment, her father had already reached out to poke the man. Kai, why does he look like an eggplant? Probably because he ate too much eggplant. Chu Qingyan replied casually. As for the person lying on the ground, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, but the curvature was so small that no one noticed it. Then I won't pester Dan Yang to eat eggplant in the future. I don't want to be like him, Chu Qingyan's father muttered. Chu Qingyan laughed softly, then turned to ask, Father, let's bring him home. Why? Chu Qingyan's father asked. Chu Qingyan tilted her head, trying to think of a reason to convince her father. This man was at least 8 meters tall. Her small body wouldn't be able to move him. She needed her father's help. Could it be that if they brought him home and planted him in the yard, there would be a lot of eggplants in the coming year? At this moment, Chu Qingyan's father, who had been circling the eggplant, suddenly clapped his hands and said to his daughter excitedly, I know. It's because he's going to be our son-in-law. Chu Qingyan blushed with shame. Father, he's marrying into our family. But why did you say that? Chu Qingyan's father raised his head proudly. Because Antigua said that old Master Li had found her daughter an inverted son-in-law, so she could order him around. If he's also an inverted son-in-law, he can help pick vegetables, collect firewood, wash clothes for Dan Yang, and even catch fish for me in the pond. Just thinking about it makes me happy. The inverted son-in-law, on the ground, couldn't help but twitch his mouth. Chu Qingyan remembered that old Master Li was a famous official in the small town. However, her father was obviously overthinking it. However, she didn't want to ruin her father's fantasy. Otherwise, she would be in trouble if he didn't help her carry the man. Yes. That's the reason. Chu Qingyan felt that she was getting better at lying through her teeth. Hearing his daughter's affirmation, Chu Qingyan's father jumped 3 feet high. He took the bamboo basket from his daughter's back and carried it on his back. Then he bent down and picked up the man on the ground. He urged, Kai, hurry up and pick up the firewood. We're going home. Chu Qingyan looked at her father, who easily picked up the man, and couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. Having a father who was once a general was awesome. Then, she turned around and picked up the firewood on the ground. The two of them immediately rushed down the mountain. Kai, I want to listen to a song. Okay. Father, what song do you want to listen to? Big Tiger. Okay. Two tigers run fast. One has no eyes, and the other has no ears. How strange. The childish lyrics and sweet singing drifted through the mountains. Don't be in a hurry to deny that you're an inverted son-in-law. Maybe one day, you'll really become an inverted son-in-law. A certain someone would never have thought that one day, he would turn from a cold and heartless llama into a big black firewood, an eggplant, and then an inverted son-in-law. He was even being carried in someone's arms like a girl. Moreover, this person was his future father-in-law. Chapter 3. When Father Chu placed the inverted onion on the bed, he ran out, saying that he was going to find a fishing net for the inverted onion, so that he could help him catch fish. Chu Qingyan laughed, and let him do what he wanted. As long as father didn't go out to provoke others, it was fine. Afterwards, she went to make a fire to prepare some hot water for the man to wash his face. However, after the spring rain, the firewood she picked up was a bit damp, so it took a long time to get the fire started. Chu Qingyan didn't care about the soot on her face, as she carried the hot water into the room. She put down the hot water and turned to look at the man on the straw bed. This person had long arms and legs. Although he wasn't the tall and sturdy type, he was still healthy and lean. In the eyes of her best friends, he would definitely have an excellent male god figure. However, Chu Qingyan had just transmigrated to this world and had many things to worry about. Therefore, she didn't have time to notice how this person's appearance could cause people to vomit blood. She only felt that such a big person, nestled in her own small bed, looked quite aggrieved. Chu Qingyan didn't care about anything else. She wrung out her clothes and wiped the man's purple face, trying to wipe away the color on his face. However, no matter how she wiped, the color on his face didn't show any signs of fading. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but frown. Could it be that this was innate? Unfortunately, there was no one to discuss this with at this time. Chu Qingyan patted her head in annoyance. It seems like I picked up a troublesome person. Then she said to herself, living people just can't move. It's a bit like a vegetable. Although her tone was annoyed, she still carefully wiped his hands and face clean. At this time, there was a sound outside the door. Chu Qingyan's eyes lit up. Mother came back. Therefore, she carried the basin of water and went out. After Chu Qingyan went out, the originally tightly closed eyes slowly opened. In an instant, a faint light flashed, just like the first light of dawn. He wanted to raise his hand, but found that his whole body was still weak. He thought that the drug's effect hadn't dissipated yet. He couldn't help but frown. Then he looked at his current situation. In front of him, there was only the peeling yellow soil on the walls, as well as the thatched roof that wasn't very tight. Occasionally, a naughty spring breeze would come in and make a turn. What a shabby room. Earlier on the mountain, he had heard the conversation between the father and daughter very clearly. If not for the hellfire incense in his body, and making him immobile for 24 hours, he would not have allowed anyone to get close to him. Fortunately, it was this pair of father and daughter who had picked him up, and they weren't his opponents. Otherwise, with his current situation, he would be in deep trouble. At this time, the conversation between the mother and daughter had also entered the house. Mother, why are you back so early today? Chu Qingyan took the rice bought by her mother, pulled her mother to a chair and sat her down. Then she reached out to massage her mother's shoulders. Mrs. Chu smiled gently. There are guests at the Li residence today, so the steward asked us to come back early. By the way, I heard your father say that he picked up a bunch of onions. What's going on? Chu Qingyan was instantly speechless. Father's description was too inappropriate. How was this a bunch of onions? It was more like a bundle of firewood. This person was so tall and strong. However, she still told her mother everything in detail. After all, her father was now like a child, and the one who could make the decisions in this house was her mother. Although she wasn't young, she was still a little girl in her early teens. Kai, you're too bold. Mrs. Chu's face stiffened. Although she looked weak, there was a faint sense of a strict mother's dignity. Chu Qingyan stuck out her tongue and admitted her mistake honestly. Mother, I was wrong. Then she stole a glance at her mother and blinked. At that time, I saw him lying there pitifully. Moreover, father happened to be there, so I brought him back. Mrs. Chu knew that her child was kind-hearted. Although she didn't agree with her, she didn't want to dampen her kindness. She couldn't help but reach out to tap her nose. Don't do it again. Yes. Chu Qingyan immediately beamed. Bring me to see that person, Mrs. Chu said. Chu Qingyan immediately led her into the room. After eavesdropping for a while, a certain someone in the corner knew that the mother and daughter were about to come in, so he closed his eyes again. Seeing the person on the bed, Mrs. Chu was still shocked. His face, Chu Qingyan said helplessly. I've already tried to wash him off, but it can't be washed off. I'm thinking that if he still doesn't wake up after tonight, I'll invite Grandpa Yao over to take a look at him tomorrow. Grandpa Yao was the only doctor in the village. Although his medical skills weren't great, he was still well respected by the villagers. However, she heard that he hadn't returned from his house visit today, so she gave up on the idea of looking for him today. That's good too. Mrs. Chu patted her hand and sighed. My Kai is a kind person. I hope that Bodhisattva will bless her in the future. The daughter in front of her had a delicate and elegant oval face. Under her slender eyebrows were a pair of black and shiny eyes. Although she was still young, she was gradually showing signs of beauty. However, due to long-term malnutrition, her complexion was sallow and thin. Mrs. Chu's heart ached for her. If the incident back then hadn't happened, her daughter would also be the daughter of a government official. She would be even more noble and beautiful than the daughter of the Li family. Sensing her mother's self-reproach, Chu Qingyan immediately guessed what she was thinking. As expected, her family's situation should be improved as soon as possible. However, she turned around and took her mother's hand, leading her to the kitchen. "Mother, although I'm kind and beautiful, I can't withstand hunger. Let's go make dinner first." The moment her daughter said that she was hungry, Mrs. Chu's heart clenched. She walked even faster than her daughter. "The steward rewarded me with a bag of rice today. I'll cook a bowl of white rice for you." Looking at her mother's receding figure, Chu Qingyan's eyes curved into crescents. Her mother was busy in the kitchen, which was built with several wooden planks and mud. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with the onion on the bed, Chu Qingyan turned around and went out to look for her father. After searching for a long time, she finally found her father sitting at the entrance of the village. He was holding a rope in his hand, but she didn't know what he was doing. She couldn't help but walk over. When Mr. Chu saw his daughter, he immediately waved his hand and flaunted, "Kai, come here. Look, I'm weaving a fishing net." Chu Qingyan looked at the rope, which was as thick as a wrist, and found it familiar. "Father, where did you get this rope?" "Oh, it's from Dajialu's cow." Mr. Chu was playing with the rope in high spirits. He didn't notice his daughter's disheveled expression in the wind. Chu Qingyan facepalmed. Forget it. Dajialu's family always laughed at her father for being a fool. She'll just treat it as a lesson. Later, when her father is done playing, she'll secretly send it back. Right at this moment, a group of people slowly drove 2 carriages over. The horses neighed loudly, as if they were afraid that no one would notice their arrival. However, the Chu father and daughter pair were having so much fun that they didn't notice them at all. When the group arrived at the entrance of the village, they saw 2 people wearing coarse clothing squatting at the entrance. A tall, thin man with a sharp nose and slanted eyes riding on horseback rode over. He raised his chin and said to the Chu father and daughter contemptuously, "Hey, is this Mao village?" Hearing this, Chu Qingyan looked up and saw the tall man. Although his face clearly showed disdain, she still nodded. Seeing this, the man's face lit up. He immediately asked, "Little beggar, is there a family in your village with the surname Chu?" "Little beggar?" Chu Qingyan lowered her head and looked at her clothes. Although they were simple, they were still clean and tidy. This man was too ostentatious. However, Chu Qingyan didn't bicker with him. There are at least 3 families with the surname Chu in Mao village. May I ask who you are and who are you looking for? Perhaps he didn't expect that there would be so many families with the surname Chu in this small village. The man's face was displeased, but his tone was incomparably arrogant as he said, "We are the Chu family from the capital's Duke Ding Yuan's mansion. You'll be scared to death if I say our name, but seeing that you're still young, I won't scare you. As long as you tell me if Chu Huayuan's family lives here, I will greatly reward you." "Chu Huayuan?" Chu Qingyan subconsciously looked at her father, who had raised his head in confusion when he heard her name. "Father, looking for you." Chapter 4. Seeing that the 2 of them were silent, the lanky man was immediately dissatisfied. He held the reins and raised his whip to frighten them. "Hey, do you know this person or not?" At this time, Chu Huayuan's father slowly stood up with the reins in his hands behind his back. He originally wanted to imitate Li Yuanwei and stroke his beard, but he didn't have a beard, so he could only stroke his chin. Then, he pretended to be serious and said, "May I ask why you're looking for me?" Chu Qingyan, who was standing to the side, couldn't help but want to clap her hands and cheer. "What, you're Chu Huayuan? Didn't I say you were an idiot?" The lanky man's eyes were about to fall out of their sockets. Chu Qingyan immediately narrowed her eyes. This person spoke without any respect, looked down on people and slandered them. It seemed that he didn't come with good intentions. "Kai, did your father act well?" Chu Huayuan's father turned around and asked his daughter with a smile. The lanky man was still immersed in shock. But when he saw him grab the little girl's hand and jump 3 feet high, he couldn't help but become angry. This idiot actually dared to play with him. Chu Qingyan saw that the man was about to explode in anger, so she took the initiative to step forward and said, "My father is Chu Huayuan. May I ask why you're looking for us?" After her reminder, a burst of urging came from the carriage not far away. The lanky man remembered the business and hurriedly put away his angry expression. Thus, the Chu family's small thatched cottage welcomed a group of unexpected guests. First master, first madam, this old woman's surname is Li, and this is Wang Ting. Both of us are second madam's subordinates. Because old master Chu misses first master Chu and his family, our first madam sent this old woman and Wang Ting to Mao village to bring you back to the Chu family. A woman in her 30s with a large black mole at the corner of her mouth grinned, revealing her yellow front teeth, as she spoke, as if she was familiar with them. Chu Huayuan's mother looked at this group of people in bewilderment, as if a pie had fallen from the sky, but she couldn't believe it. Chu Qingyan looked at the old woman who was speaking. Her eyes were darting around, and her fingers were twisting her handkerchief. She seemed to be speaking insincerely, or perhaps she was just brushing her off. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but narrow her eyes. This old master Chu didn't think about it earlier or later, only coming to fetch someone 10 years later. Someone who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. However, when Chu Qingyan turned to look at her mother's expression, she seemed to be delighted. Seeing Mrs. Chu hesitate, old Madam Li glanced at Wang Ting. Wang Ting immediately understood and stepped forward. He said to Mrs. Chu, "First Madam, it's too hard for you and First Master to live here. Look at this house. It's so bare. How can it provide a stable life for Miss Xiao? My madam has said that as long as the three of you return, you will be able to enjoy a life of luxury, and you will not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of your life." Chu Qingyan stared at Wang Ting. Her tone was glib when she said the last sentence, and it was obvious that she didn't mean what she said. When she was in the student union, she had recruited several secretaries, so she was quite experienced in judging people. So these two people must be deceiving them. But she didn't understand. Her family was weak and had a foolish father. What was there to be concerned about? Could it be that she was thinking too much? At this moment, Madame Li's gaze fell on her, as if she was looking at meat on a chopping board, and her eyes shone with a sinister green light. "This must be ninth young miss. You're so pretty. If old Madame sees you, she'll be very happy." Chu Qingyan frowned. She didn't like the way Madame Li looked at her, so she stood there in a daze. After all, she was a country bumpkin, so it was normal for her to be rude. Seeing that Chu Qingyan was minding her own business, and didn't have any intention of greeting them, Madame Li sneered. As expected of someone who grew up in the countryside, she had no manners at all. They chatted for a while. By this time, the sky had darkened, and her mother had tidied up a room for them to rest in. Chu Qingyan clearly saw the disdain that flashed through their eyes when they scanned the room. She couldn't help but be angry and amused. These people were really snobs raised in the Chu family courtyard. Because the house wasn't big, Chu Qingyan's room was given to the man she had picked up today. So Chu Qingyan's mother let Chu Qingyan's father share a room with the man for the night, while she and her daughter slept in the same room. Chu Qingyan's mother and father went to get blankets from the room, while Chu Qingyan went into her room to check on the unconscious man. That man was still in the same position as today, lying motionless. Sometimes, Chu Qingyan felt that if it weren't for the fact that he was still breathing, she would have thought that he had already died in the underworld. Chu Qingyan walked over, wrung out the cloth, and gently wiped his face. She suddenly realized that his skin didn't seem as purple anymore, but it hadn't completely disappeared. Just as she was about to continue wiping him, her mother suddenly called her. She immediately put down the cloth and hurried out. The moment Chu Qingyan left, that pair of tightly shut eyes opened again. He tried to move his hands, but found that the hellfire incense had already dissipated. His limbs could move freely, and he slowly sat up. At this moment, a black shadow flashed in front of him. "Master, this subordinate has come late." The man waved his hand and looked around. It was indeed very simple and crude. The black-clothed man didn't know what his master was looking at, so he said in a low voice, "Master, do you need this subordinate to get rid of everyone in this house?" His master's whereabouts couldn't be revealed. It was best to get rid of these people to prevent future trouble. "No need. Leave some money and leave immediately," the man said in a low voice. The black-clothed man didn't know why his master wanted him to do this, but he still obediently took out a stack of banknotes and placed them on the bed. Seeing his master raise his eyebrows, seemingly dissatisfied, the black-clothed man immediately took out a stack of banknotes and added them. Only then did his master's eyebrows relax, and a satisfied expression appeared on his face. The black-clothed man wiped the sweat on his forehead. His master was really strange today. Now that this father and daughter had money, they wouldn't casually think that he was an upside-down son-in-law. When he thought about how he was being thought of as an upside-down son-in-law, he felt a little depressed. "Let's go." Yes. When Chu Qingyan came back, she found that the purple-faced man had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind 20 banknotes of 100 taels. Perhaps the other party really had some background that couldn't be revealed, so he quietly left after waking up. However, for Chu Qingyan, she didn't care about who this person was. Him leaving immediately was also what she wanted. After all, she was in a different world, and her status was low, so she didn't want to attract trouble. Looking at the banknotes in her hand, Chu Qingyan was still very happy. She sighed with emotion. So saving people could actually make money. In the future, she would definitely save a few more people. Perhaps she could become rich. However, this was also a blind cat running into a dead mouse. She thought about it and gave up. When Mother Chu saw so much money, she was also shocked. She hurriedly put it away and warned her daughter not to easily tell others. Otherwise, it would easily attract the jealousy of others, because 2,000 taels was not a small amount. Chu Qingyan smiled and nodded. This windfall might be able to let the family live a good life. That night, Father Chu still went to sleep in Chu Qingyan's room. Chu Qingyan and Mother Chu covered themselves with a blanket and lay down. "Kai, do you want to go to the capital?" Mother Chu asked softly. "Wherever Mother and Father are, I will be there." Chu Qingyan could hear the anticipation in her mother's voice, so she went along with her words. Mother Chu sighed when she heard this. Kai, Mother feels that the Chu family's intentions are unfathomable. However, Mother feels that the doctors in the capital are definitely better than those in our village. Mother wants to treat your father's illness. 10 years ago, a famous doctor came to the capital. Unfortunately, at that time, our family encountered great changes, and we were unable to meet him. Now that I think about it, it's very regrettable. So this was her mother's plan. Chu Qingyan held her mother's hand with a serious expression that did not match her age. "Mother, I originally did not want to go back to the Chu family, because I also felt that the Chu family did not have good intentions. However, I feel that we should go to a big city to take a look at Father's illness. Perhaps we can really find the famous doctor that Mother mentioned. Moreover, we have money on hand, so the medical fees won't be a problem. I don't think there is anything in our family that the Chu family is coveting. Why don't we go back and take a look? If it really doesn't work out, we can move out." Okay. In the past, her husband was foolish and her daughter was weak. When she encountered problems, she could only cry and grit her teeth to make decisions. There was no one to discuss with. Now that she heard her daughter's words, Mother Chu's heart that was hanging in the air finally settled down. She did not realize that her daughter was mature beyond her age. Chu Qingyan looked at the walls that were peeling off the yellow soil. Although she could not live a good life here, at least she could live freely. However, when she thought of her father's illness and her mother's pair of rough hands, she suddenly had the urge to leave. Although she had the body of a 10-year-old, her soul came from the 21st century. Even if she could not give her parents a luxurious life, it should not be difficult for her to have a stable footing in this era. However, Chu Qingyan did not expect that fate always liked to torture people. She would also turn her life upside down, just because she stepped into the Chu family. Chapter 5. When Chu Machen's mother told old Madame Li and the others about her decision, old Madame Li's eyes lit up. She kept praising Chu Machen's mother for being reasonable, and she couldn't hide the smile on her face. Chu Machen's mother and Chu Qingyan looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Just then, Chu Machen's father suddenly jumped out and asked seriously, "Dan Nyang, why do we have to leave?" Well, Chu Machen's mother didn't know how to explain it to him. "Father, we have to go back to the capital city. We have a home there." Chu Qingyan comforted him. "No, I'm not leaving. Our home is here." Chu Machen's father became very astute and didn't waver. Chu Qingyan continued to smile. "Father, didn't you want to eat tong halu and osmanthus cake? We can't eat them here, but they can be found in the capital city. I'll take you there." "Tong halu?" Chu Machen's father's eyes lit up. Chu Qingyan nodded. "Osmanthus cake." She continued to nod. "There's roast duck, little radish head." She nodded. Chu Qingyan thought her father had been convinced. Just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, she saw her father's happy face droop again. "Father, what's wrong?" she asked in confusion. "But the upside-down onion isn't here. I want to wait for him to leave with us." Chu Machen's father squatted at the door, looking very pitiful. Chu Qingyan sweated. Her father had started to make a fuss when he didn't see the purple-faced man when he entered the room last night. She didn't know how her father had taken a fancy to someone he had only met once. She didn't expect him to still remember. That person had left without leaving any message, but she couldn't tell her father that he had abandoned them. So she thought for a moment, then squatted in front of her father and said with a smile, "Father, the upside-down onion knows that we're going back to the capital, so he went ahead to wait for us." "Then what are we waiting for? We have to hurry, or we won't catch up with him. I'm still waiting for him to weave a net for me to catch fish." Chu Machen's father jumped to his feet and excitedly urged Dan Yang to pack their luggage. He couldn't wait to fly to the capital. Chu Qingyan was speechless for a moment. She had only met him once. Why was her father so worried? However, as long as he could convince his father to set off, it didn't matter whether he was stabbed in the back or stabbed in the back. Meanwhile, the purple-faced man that the father and daughter of the Chu clan were thinking about was currently sitting on the back of a horse, waiting for his subordinate's report. His entire face was covered by a silver mask. "Master, we just received a secret report from the capital." The subordinate glanced at him, looking a little hesitant. The person who was gazing into the distance turned to look at his subordinate. His eyes darkened. "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't hesitate." "Master, retired emperor returned to the capital a month ago." The subordinate thought for a while and picked a relatively safe topic. "Oh," he raised his eyebrows. His imperial grandfather had left the capital for more than 5 years. His return at this time was somewhat unexpected. However, he felt that his subordinate's gaze was somewhat strange. He could not help but ask, "Is there anything else?" The subordinate glanced at his master and immediately lowered his head to quickly report, "Retired emperor arranged a marriage for you a few days ago." "What did you say?" Xian's ink-black eyes immediately darkened. Every time his imperial grandfather came back, he would always give him a surprise. The subordinate could not raise his head under his master's gloomy gaze. His master seemed to be slightly annoyed, but he wanted to cry but had no tears. This was not the worst thing. The worst thing was that if his master knew the woman's age and identity, he would probably be even more furious. Just as he was thinking about how to phrase it clearly, the fine horse in front of him had already galloped away. The scene returned to Mao Village. Chu Qingyan, Chu Machen, and Chu Machen simply packed their belongings and boarded a carriage prepared by the Chu clan. Old Madame Li and the rest of the servants sat in another carriage. Old Madame Li and Wang Ting exchanged a look. Thus, one sat in the carriage, the other on the horse, and the other sat close to each other to talk. "It seems that this family is quite tactful." Wang Ting winked at old Madame Li and looked at the carriage behind them. At this time, old Madame Li no longer had the hypocritical respect she had in front of Chu Qingyan's family. She raised a finger and looked smug. It's their good fortune to be able to enjoy the Chu clan's glory and wealth. There's no reason to refuse. Even if they don't agree, we have plenty of ways to get them back. What Chu Qingyan didn't know was that if her family didn't obediently cooperate, what awaited them was the treatment of being tied up. Wang Ting chuckled. That's true. But then again, we've successfully completed the task Master gave us. When we return, Master will definitely reward us greatly. Hearing this, a greedy light flashed through old Madame Li's eyes. Isn't that so? As long as this girl returns, the Chu clan's crisis can be resolved. We can be considered Master's right-hand men. Old Madame Li's smile became even more frightening when she recalled how Master had instructed them to bring old Master Chu's family back. If they completed the task, she would reward them handsomely. Wang Ting glanced at the carriage behind them. He was in a very good mood, as if a great future was laid out in front of him. At this time, Father Chu was nestled in a corner, playing with the bamboo dragonfly his daughter had woven from dried grass. Chu Qingyan and Mother Chu were sitting across from each other, their faces filled with anticipation and apprehension about the unknown. Mother, just now, I felt that old Madame Li and Wang Ting's expressions were a little strange, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips as she spoke. Mother Chu sighed. Mother also felt it. If we really can't survive in the Chu clan, we can come out again. It's not like we haven't left before. Chu Qingyan could hear the sorrow in her mother's words, and her heart couldn't help but clench. Her mother was a woman, and she had to face the difficulties of a foolish husband and a weak daughter as soon as she got married. It was already difficult for her to have been able to hold on for so many years. How could she bear to see her mother and father suffer again? She reached out to hold her mother's hands, which were no longer delicate, and said in a comforting tone, Mother, don't worry. Your daughter has grown up, and will protect you and father. Also, we have money on us, so we don't have to worry about not being able to establish ourselves in the capital. Mother Chu looked at her daughter's sallow and emaciated face, due to years of undefeating, and blamed herself endlessly. She reached out to pull her daughter into her arms, her voice choked with sobs. Kai, Mother's good daughter. At this time, Father Chu saw this scene, and also came over to hug the mother and daughter. He imitated Mother Chu. Kai, Mother's good daughter. Mother Chu and Chu Qingyan couldn't help but burst into laughter when they heard this. The sadness in the air was immediately washed away by Father Chu's jesting. Chu Qingyan turned her head, and the carriage's curtains happened to be blown up by the wind. The scenery outside the window was unobstructed. Pink and white flowers swayed in the wind, their petals layer upon layer, delicate and bright, causing one to feel pity for them. Chu Qingyan's lips curved slightly. No matter what the road ahead was, since she had made her choice, she would resolutely walk down it. Chapter 6. After traveling nonstop for half a month, Chu Qingyan felt as though she was about to fall apart from the jolting of the carriage. Her mother would also pat her shoulders from time to time. Fortunately, her father felt that the jolting was very fun, and he did not seem tired at all. But Chu Qingyan felt faintly uneasy. Old Madame Li's party traveled through wind and rain without rest, desperately heading for the capital. This was inconceivable to her. It was as if she and her parents were not being picked up to reunite with the Chu family, but were rushing to a banquet at Hongmen. This thought made her tremble all over. Just then the carriage stopped. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows in confusion. Then she heard the sound of hooves approaching. Chu Qingyan lifted the curtain and saw Wang Ting standing on the horse. Seeing her poke her head out, he immediately said, Miss Xiao, after passing this mountain today, we will reach the capital. This servant came to inform you. Chu Qingyan nodded and lowered the curtain. Wang Ting saw that Miss Xiao was always cold and indifferent to others and spoke very little. He had previously thought that this was a country girl who did not know etiquette. But after interacting with her for some time, he realized that although Miss Xiao did not speak much, every time she spoke, she hit the nail on the head. She knew when to advance and when to retreat. She really did not seem like someone who had grown up in the mountains. Take her actions just now as an example. Although she did not speak, her bright and cold eyes made him, who had been a servant for more than 20 years, feel slightly fearful. Wang Ting thought about it. Although Miss Xiao's family could be said to be doomed if they returned to the Chu family, it was said that extreme misfortune would bring bliss. Perhaps Miss Xiao would fly to the branch and become a phoenix. He could not be as rude as before. In any case, being polite would not cause him to lose a piece of meat. If one person succeeded, all his chickens and dogs would rise to the sky, and he would have a good future. So Wang Ting made up his mind. He would not be as polite as old Madame Li on the surface, but he would secretly squeeze this family. Chu Qingyan didn't know that her careless actions would bring about such an effect. Although Wang Ting was more attentive to her, which made her a little confused, her thoughts were all on the upcoming family meeting tomorrow. Back then, when her father fought in the army and brought glory to the family, they saw him as the hero of the family. However, when her father was defeated and was blamed by the people, they did not stand in front of him to protect him. Instead, they drove her father, who was seriously injured, out of the Chu family, along with her delicate mother and her, who was not even 2 years old. It was easy to add flowers to brocade, but difficult to provide timely help. Chu Qingyan collected her thoughts and turned to look at her tired and sleepy mother, as well as her father, whose eyes were wide open. She couldn't help but stop her father's hand, which was about to pull her mother's long hair, and said with a stern face to scare him, "Father, mother is tired. If you wake her up, daughter will ignore you." Mr. Chu immediately retracted his hand and stuck his tongue out at his daughter. Then, he sat down obediently and looked at her innocently. Kai, just now that Horseface said that we're almost in the capital. Does that mean that I'll be able to see the inverted scallion soon? Horseface. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but laugh. The nickname that her father gave Wang Ting was quite appropriate. However, when she heard the last sentence, the smile on her face froze. She originally thought that her father had forgotten about the purple-faced man after not mentioning it for so long. Who would have thought that he would bring it up again at this time? She suddenly didn't know how to respond. That. Not noticing his daughter's awkward expression, Mr. Chu continued with a yearning look. The inverted scallion must have already weaved a net and is waiting for me. When the time comes, I'll take you all to fish together. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She hoped that her father wouldn't be disappointed when the time came. The sun set and the mountains rose again. Another day passed, and Chu Qingyan and the others had already arrived at the capital of Sichuan country. First master, first madam, after crossing this street, we'll reach our residence, Wang Ting said from the side as he rode on a horse. Chu Qingyan had already lifted the curtain of the carriage when they entered the city. She admired the bustling and prosperous capital of Sichuan country. As expected of the capital, regardless of whether it was the people walking on the streets or the vendors, they all gave off a different feeling. It was just like when she had traveled to Shanghai during the summer vacation. However, when she was in this bustling ancient capital, she finally accepted the fact that she had really crossed 1,000 years to come to this country that had been submerged in the river of history. The dazzling shops reminded her of the modern version of the 3 lanes and 7 alleys. However, the buildings in front of her gave her a real visual impact. She didn't tiptoe to imagine how the ancient people lived across the river of time, because it was really happening right in front of her eyes. Retracting her gaze, she turned to see the excitement in her mother's eyes and the curiosity on her father's face. She suddenly felt that perhaps her decision to come to the capital was the right one. The more they walked, the more secluded the road became, and the fewer people there were. Chu Qingyan understood that the more wealthy a family was, the more tranquil the place they lived in. Chu Qingyan sized up the surrounding environment. She kept comforting herself with this excuse, but the more she walked, the more she couldn't calm down and deceive herself. Weeds, broken tiles, mottled doors and walls, potholes on the ground. Was this really a wealthy district? It should be considered a slum, right? When the carriage passed through a small alley, many beggars swarmed up and stopped the carriage to ask for something to eat. The womenfolk were so frightened that they hid in the carriage. Wang Ting and the other manservants immediately led people to drive them away. Only then did they resume their normal journey. Chu Qingyan's mother patted her chest and said in a frightened voice, "This place was clearly very prosperous 10 years ago. How did it become so desolate now?" Hearing her mother's words, Chu Qingyan couldn't help but ask, "Mother, what was this place like 10 years ago?" At the mention of the past, Chu Qingyan's mother's eyes lit up. She took her daughter's hand and reminisced. This used to be called General Street. Every family had a general. There were many people coming and going, and it was very lively. The common people were proud to be able to live here. But then, Chu Qingyan's mother's expression dimmed as she finished speaking. But your father was defeated in that battle, and his entire army was wiped out. Many of the generals and soldiers who sacrificed themselves were from the residents of this street. After that, those families couldn't accept the condemnation of the common people. They were disheartened and moved away, and the place became more and more desolate. But I remember that our Chu family produced civil officials. How did we end up living here? Chu Qingyan was puzzled. Chu Qingyan's mother sighed. The Chu family hadn't produced a civil official for many years, and gradually declined. It wasn't until your father became famous in that battle that the Chu family was blessed by the emperor. Your father was granted a house, and the Chu family moved here. What? Mother, do you mean that the Chu family we're going to later is actually father's house? Chu Qingyan widened her eyes. Chu Qingyan's mother sighed and nodded. Chu Qingyan immediately felt depressed. So her family of 3 had been taken over by someone else, and then chased out of the house. How could she not be angry? In that case, she wanted to see just how shameless this family was. Chapter 7. From afar, Chu Qingyan could see the plaque of the Chu estate. She raised her brows. They were finally here. When she thought the carriage would stop at the entrance, and was about to alight, the carriage unexpectedly turned and drove in the other direction. She frowned. At this time, Wang Ting dismounted and followed the carriage as he said, "Ninth young mistress, old master said that after what happened to first master in the past, entering through the main door will not reflect well. So this humble one will take you through the side door." Hearing Wang Ting's matter-of-fact tone, Chu Qingyan was both angry and amused. So this was a show of strength, reminding them to always remember father's defeat that year. But she didn't want to do as they wished. Chu Qingyan wanted to lift the curtain and argue with them. But halfway through, someone grabbed her wrist. She turned back and saw her mother. She couldn't help but say, "Mother, let me talk to them. I don't want you and father to suffer." Originally, her family had been wandering outside and suffered a lot. After learning about the Chu estate's deeds, she couldn't return home for 10 years. When she returned, she was treated as a jinx, and had to enter through the back door with her tail between her legs. How could she take this lying down? Mother Chu shook her head. "Kai, don't be impulsive. We have to endure this humiliation." Hearing this, Chu Qingyan felt that she was indeed impulsive. The words "mother" were full of her mother's sorrow for the past 10 years. Chu Qingyan's heart ached. She was unfamiliar with this place, and shouldn't act rashly. Otherwise, it was very likely that she would implicate her parents. So she gritted her teeth and looked at the main door getting farther and farther away. She made a decision in her heart. In the future, she would definitely bring her parents into the Chu family through the front door, and make the Chu family regret the humiliation they had suffered today. The carriage stopped at the side door, and the group alighted. Old Madam Li knocked lightly on the side door, and a servant girl came out to open it. Old Madam Li said arrogantly, "Shan Cha, go tell second madam that first master's family has arrived." The servant girl named Shan Cha glanced at the people behind Old Madam Li, then nodded and quickly left. Old Madam Li was the first to enter the door, followed by Chu Qingyan and her family. Wang Ting and the others led the carriage in another direction. When the servants passing by saw Chu Qingyan and her entourage, they all cast curious glances at them. However, Old Madam Li glared at them sternly and chased them away. Chu Qingyan looked down and ignored these people. Instead, she held on to her father's hand to prevent him from getting lost. He walked through the backyard toward the main hall. Just now, a servant girl had come to inform them that Old Master Li, Old Madam Li, and the others were waiting for them in the main hall. Therefore, Old Madam Li didn't care much, and impolitely urged Chu Qingyan and the others to walk faster. Although Chu Qingyan was surprised that Old Madam Li's attitude towards them had changed drastically when they entered the Chu family, she was mentally prepared. At this time, her mind was focused on dealing with the Chu family, and she didn't want to bicker with her. Before they stepped into the main hall, a loud voice reached the ears of Chu Qingyan and the others. I say, second sister-in-law, you really sent people to bring the fool's family over? Aren't you afraid that our Fu can't afford to raise these good-for-nothings? Third sister-in-law, don't you think it's rude to say this in front of father and mother? In the end, eldest brother is still one of us. Another voice sounded, but it was laced with needles and seemed to have a trace of disdain. I'm just speaking the truth. I think father and mother won't blame me. It was obvious that her arrogance had diminished. That's enough. Let's wait for them to arrive. A slightly aged voice rang out, stopping the conversation between the two. Outside, Chu Qingyan and the others clearly heard these words. She looked at her mother, whose face had instantly paled, and felt her heart ache. She tightened her mother's hand, and used this action to comfort her. Mother Chu patted the back of her hand to indicate that she was fine. Father Chu was oblivious to all of this, and was happily playing with the bamboo dragonfly in his hand. At this time, old Madam Li led them through the door, and then bowed to the two seated. Old Madam, First Master's family has been brought over. Good. The white-haired old man on the right of the main seat nodded coolly. Chu Qingyan took advantage of this time to look around to scan the hall. There were 4 men and 4 women. Needless to say, the main seat was Old Master Chu, Old Madam Chu, father's younger brother and his wife. She had to call them granduncle and aunt. The other 6 people were father's cousins and cousins' wives. There were 8 people sitting in the small main hall, and with their group, it was slightly crowded. Just as she was secretly sizing up the other party, she realized that the person sitting in the hall was openly looking at her. It was as if he was weighing the weight of her meat. This made Chu Qingyan feel uncomfortable all over. Chu Qingyan followed behind her mother, and bowed to the people in the seats, calling them granduncle and aunt. Only then did she dare to look up, and look directly at them. Old Master Chu's face was stiff and rigid, giving off a meticulous and old-fashioned aura. Old Madam Chu looked at them with a gloomy gaze, the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deep and deep. Her tightly knitted brows could squeeze a fly to death. Old Madam, go meet your younger brothers and sisters. Just as Old Madam Chu finished speaking, an incongruous voice sounded, breaking the strange atmosphere. Dan Yang Kaikai, where is this? It's so familiar. Father Chu's eyes widened as he looked around. Mother Chu immediately pulled her husband aside, but unfortunately, she couldn't stop him from speaking. As soon as Father Chu spoke, a burst of mocking laughter sounded in the hall. Big brother, we haven't seen each other for 10 years, but you're still so simple and naive. The slightly plump middle-aged man on the right mocked bluntly. Father Chu turned to look at him with a puzzled expression. Big brother? You're calling me? Who are you? The shifty-eyed middle-aged man on the other side chuckled. Of course Big brother is calling you. He's Ji Ming, your second cousin. I'm Ji Hua, your third cousin. Could it be that Big brother's memory has deteriorated after 10 years? What should we do? Back then, you were as foolish as a child. Now you won't degenerate into an infant, right? As soon as he said this, the hall roared with laughter. Chu Qingyan was displeased. Although she expected that the people of the Chu family weren't good people, she didn't expect that they would make fun of her family in public. Old Master Chu and Old Madam Chu were like old men in meditation, as if they didn't care about the farce at all, allowing the younger generation to make a ruckus. What kind of big family was this? They were like petty people in the marketplace, making a ruckus without hiding their malicious thoughts. They could be called a family of the highest quality. But I only have Dan Yang and Kai Kai. I don't have a younger brother. If you really are my younger brothers, you wouldn't have never brought me delicious food to see me for so many years, nor lived with me. I don't believe you liars. Father Chu glanced at them, and said with a rare serious expression. As soon as he said this, everyone fell silent and looked embarrassed. It was obvious that they rarely heard such blunt words. Chu Qingyan glanced at the people present. As expected, they all looked embarrassed. She snorted coldly. Did these people know how to be thick-skinned? Old Madam Chu was worried that her husband would say something else, so she immediately pulled her daughter forward and introduced them. Kai Kai, this is your second uncle and aunt. She pointed to the chubby middle-aged man, and the girl with a fake smile. Then she pointed to the shifty-eyed middle-aged man, and the girl with the raised chin. This is your third uncle. She then pointed to the cowering middle-aged man, and the timid girl beside him. This is your fourth uncle and aunt. Although she didn't like these people, the younger generation still had to act like one. Thus, she walked over to greet them one by one. But she didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that these people looked at her strangely, making her feel uneasy. Chapter 8. Sure enough, she grew up in the countryside. Look at her small arms and legs. She doesn't even weigh 1 or 2 kilograms. If you push her out, you'll think she's a boy. The loud voice she heard outside the door sounded again. Chu Qingyan took a closer look, and saw that it was her third aunt, who had high expectations. She couldn't help but sneer. She didn't even have enough to eat in Mao Village. It was already good enough that she could grow up safely. It was simply a fool's dream to expect her to grow up white and fat. The third aunt was Madame Wang. Her sharp sarcasm immediately received everyone's approval. Chu Qingyan frowned. She didn't understand why these people kept looking at her. Forget it. She's still a daughter of the Chu family. It's better than nothing. Old Madame Chu spoke at this time, a stern look flashing through her eyes. Mother is right. It's good that she's here. The second aunt, Madame Xing, also chimed in with a smile. Although her clothes are a bit shabby, and her looks are a bit lacking, as long as she stays in our Chu family for 2 days, she can still go out and meet people. Mother and father can rest assured. Madame Wang acted as if she was picking vegetables at the market. She was being picky, as if Chu Qingyan was really ugly. In fact, although Chu Qingyan was a bit thin and weak, her appearance wasn't bad. Madame Wang, who had seen too many people, could tell at a glance that Chu Qingyan was still a beauty. In time, she would definitely surpass her daughters. Therefore, Madame Wang couldn't bear to see her living well, and often trampled on her. Chu Qingyan had already gotten used to this family's glib tongue, after experiencing their family's glib tongue. However, it was difficult for her mother to see her own daughter being criticized like this, but unable to refute. Her expression was very ugly. Madam, you're in charge of arranging their accommodations. I still have a painting to admire, so I'll take my leave first. Old Master Chu didn't look at Chu Qingyan's group again and left. After Old Master Chu left, Old Madame Chu sized them up sternly and said to Madame Xing, second brother's wife, Mother is a bit tired. I'll let you make the arrangements. Yes. Madame Xing immediately agreed. Thus Old Madame Chu also left. After the 2 elders left, Second Master Chu patted his sleeves and got up to leave. Third Master Chu and Madame Wang also left with their chins raised. Fourth Master Chu, Chu Zhizhi, and his wife Madame Lin, who had been standing at the side, also left. The small main hall suddenly became empty, leaving only Madame Xing and Chu Qingyan's family of 3. Chu Qingyan looked at the empty main hall and raised her eyebrows. Looking at everyone's attitude just now, she did not feel welcome at all. On the contrary, there was a sense of evilness in all their words and expressions. The meeting seemed to be nothing more than a formality. It was as if it was premeditated. Although Chu Qingyan usually did not pay attention to many things, her instincts had never been wrong. Thus, she immediately tensed up and raised her guard. Her gaze shifted to the only person in the hall, her nominal second aunt. Madame Xing still had a fake smile on her face as she said to Madame Chu, You must be tired after such a long journey. I'll get someone to bring you to rest first. Without waiting for Madame Chu to reply, Madame Xing had already turned to the head maidservant beside her and said, Primrose, bring old master, old madam and ninth miss to rest. Yes, madam. Primrose bowed to them, and led them out of the main hall. Chu Qingyan and the rest followed Primrose to their rooms. When they walked out of the main hall, there was already someone waiting there. It was the maidservant Shan Cha, who had reported earlier. Primrose said to Shan Cha, Shan Cha, bring ninth miss to the east wing. I'll bring old master and old madam to the west wing. Chu Qingyan immediately stood up and asked, Do you mean that I'm going to be separated from father and mother, and our rooms are not together? Primrose glanced at her. Old madam has already instructed that ninth miss is already 10 years old, and should avoid arousing suspicion. so your rooms are not arranged together. But Chu Qingyan still wanted to say something, but her mother stopped her and whispered to her, "Be obedient first. Don't get into a conflict." Chu Qingyan couldn't help but shut up obediently. Primrose raised her brows at her mockingly, then turned to leave with Madam Chu and Father Chu. At this moment Shancha said to her, "Ninth Miss, please follow this servant." Mother and father had already walked far away, so she could only follow Shancha. Although she vaguely felt that the Chu family wanted to separate the three of them, she had no choice but to lower her head under the eaves. She had to figure out the situation first before making any plans. Shancha turned to look at Ninth Miss, who was quietly following behind her, and couldn't help but be curious. Didn't Ninth Miss come from the countryside? Why didn't she look like her at all? She was gentle and quiet, but also had an indescribable calmness. Even the other misses in the residence didn't exude such tranquility. However, thinking of Second Madam's intention of bringing Ninth Miss and her family over, Shancha felt sympathy for Ninth Mississippi. Although Njing was walking at the back, it didn't mean that Shancha's expression didn't escape her eyes. Perhaps it was because she was still young. Shancha didn't hide her emotions from her, so she could clearly see the pity in Shancha's eyes. Strange, why was it pity? She hadn't lived a good life for 10 years, but it didn't mean that she should be pitied by the servants. Thinking back to how everyone treated her parents coldly just now, there were even more gazes on her, even though she was still a child less than 2 months old when she left. Moreover, even the maidservants were sympathizing with her. Could it be that something unpredictable was waiting for her? Just as she was letting her imagination run wild, Shancha stopped and said to her, "Ninth Miss, we're here. This is where you'll be staying from now on." Chu Qingyan suddenly looked up, the complicated emotions in her eyes fading away. She regained her smile and nodded to Shancha. Yes, the wisdom that flashed through her eyes just now made Shancha startled. In the blink of an eye, she saw that Ninth Miss was looking at her calmly. Shancha thought that she was seeing things, so she quickly opened the door and let her in. Chu Qingyan looked around the room. Although it wasn't big, it was much better than the room she lived in Mao Village. Someone must have tidied it up before, because the room was clean and tidy. "Ninth Miss, Second Madam asked me to serve you temporarily. She'll send a new servant girl over in a few days." Shancha smiled at her. She was the same age as her, but she had already learned how to serve people. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but sigh. This was the ancient monarchical society, where people at the bottom had no freedom and human rights. Chu Qingyan nodded, indicating that she understood. She placed the bundle in her hand on the table. Shancha immediately took it and said, "Ninth Miss, let me help you unpack." She wanted to refuse, but after thinking about it, she let her do it. When Shancha opened the bundle, Chu Qingyan stood up and walked around the room. "Miss, would you like some tea?" Shancha asked with a smile. Chu Qingyan really felt thirsty at Shancha's mention, so she said, "Okay." Shancha picked up the teacup and started pouring tea. Chu Qingyan walked to the table and looked at Shancha. She suddenly asked, "Shancha, do you know what happened in the Chu family recently?" With that, the teacup that Shancha had just picked up fell on the table with a clang. Chapter 9. The hot tea spilled on the table, and Shancha immediately began to clean it up in a flurry. As she cleaned up, she hurriedly replied, "Nothing major happened in the residence. It's fine." Oh, Chu Qingyan looked at Shancha, who was obviously flustered by her words, and raised her eyebrows. "Shancha is clumsy. Please forgive me, ninth young mistress. Shancha will pour you another cup." Shancha, who was made guilty by ninth young mistress's ambiguous tone, immediately used pouring tea to cover up her current emotions. Chu Qingyan smiled faintly. "It's fine." Taking the teacup that Shancha handed to her, Chu Qingyan took a sip. Then, as if she had mentioned something, she asked, "Shancha, do you know why Old Master Chu suddenly wanted to bring our family back?" "It should be because Old Master Chu misses ninth young mistress, and first Old Master and first Madam." Shancha lowered her eyes and replied, "Mrs. Haha." Chu Qingyan couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Back then, Old Madam Li had said the same thing in Mao Village. However, in the main hall just now, she only saw old Master Chu treating father and mother coldly. Before the chair even warmed up, he wanted to leave. Perhaps in his eyes, they weren't even as good as the paintings he wanted to admire. What was there to miss? If she still couldn't tell, she would really be blind. Shansha, I heard that I have a few brothers and sisters. Why haven't I seen them today? Obviously, Shansha knew something, so Chu Qingyan planned to use a roundabout method to get information. Old Master Chu hired a teacher for the young masters and misses, so the young masters and misses are all studying. After class, ninth young mistress will be able to see them. Seeing that ninth young mistress was no longer entangled in those questions, Shansha heaved a sigh of relief, and immediately replied cheerfully. Shansha's change in mood did not escape Chu Qingyan's eyes. She understood in her heart and sat down on the chair, holding her chin with both hands, and asked innocently, "Then can I go to school with my brothers and sisters in the future?" "I'm afraid that in the future, ninth young lady won't be able to." The words that came out of her mouth stopped abruptly. Shansha looked at her awkwardly and quickly said, "Ninth young lady, this servant just remembered that the kitchen is still boiling water. I'll go take a look first." Without waiting for Chu Qingyan to reply, she left the room as if a dog was chasing her. Chu Qingyan looked at Shansha's fleeing figure. She slowly straightened her body, and the innocent smile on her face gradually faded. She looked at the tea in her hand calmly, and her heart was in a mess. Just now, she was just testing Shansha with her words. She didn't expect to find some clues. Something big must have happened in the Chu family recently, so they brought their family over not because they missed them, but because they were plotting something. Otherwise, Shansha wouldn't have hesitated and said that she didn't have the chance to go to school with her brothers and sisters. If her guess was correct, then the target of the Chu clan was most likely her, because from the moment she entered the Chu clan, everyone's eyes had been fixed on her. But she couldn't understand what the Chu clan was plotting against her. She didn't have any peerless martial arts, nor did she have a treasure map. What did she have that would allow others to spy on her? This was what she couldn't figure out. After sitting in the room for half an hour, Shansha came in late again. This time she brought dinner. Although it was only some salted vegetables and tofu, it was more sumptuous than any meal she had ever eaten since she transmigrated. But now she had no appetite at all, so she just casually ate 2 mouthfuls. Shansha, who was serving at the side, looked down at her feet silently. In the afternoon, she almost couldn't handle this ninth mistress, who looked easy to bully, but was actually very eloquent. Before the ninth mistress's family came, everyone in the residence was ordered to keep their mouths shut. They must not mention that matter to the ninth mistress. Otherwise, they would be punished according to the family rules. Just thinking about it scared her. Chu Qingyan ate absent-mindedly, while Shansha was trembling with fear, afraid that she would ask something taboo again. After the meal, the sky was almost dark. Chu Qingyan stood up. Shansha quickly asked, "Ninth mistress, do you want to take a bath?" "No, I'm just full. I want to go for a walk to digest." "Why don't Shansha take me to mother and father's place?" Chu Qingyan returned to being an innocent girl, looking at Shansha with a pair of large eyes. Shansha wanted to say that it was already late, and that they could go tomorrow. But she couldn't say it under the ninth mistress's pure eyes. Although second madam had instructed her not to reveal that matter to the ninth mistress, she didn't restrict her freedom. Thus she nodded and said, "Then I'll take you there." Chu Qingyan immediately followed behind her with a face full of joy, and walked towards the place where mother and father lived. Along the way, there was only more secluded places. It was practically a wasteland. Chu Qingyan's face darkened, until Shansha told her that her mother and father lived in the simple house in front. She immediately quickened her pace and walked past her. At this moment, father and mother Chu were eating dinner. Seeing their daughter enter, mother Chu immediately said happily to her, "Kai is here." Father Chu also waved his chopsticks at her, expressing his joy. Chu Qingyan went forward and hugged her mother and father. Only then did she smile, but when she glanced at the food on the table, the smile on her face froze. She walked to the table and picked up the cold and rotten steamed buns and the rice mixed with stones. Then, she looked around the room full of cobwebs and the worn-out windows that didn't block the wind. She couldn't help but feel angry. Kai, it's okay. As long as you can eat your fill. Mother Chu patted her hand and comforted her. Hearing this, Chu Qingyan couldn't help hugging her mother, tears welling up in her eyes. Mother, why are you living more miserably in the Chu family than in Mao village? Why don't we go back? Silly child, what nonsense are you saying? Since you're already here, how can you say such discouraging things because of such a small matter? Mother Chu smiled gently and said softly as she stroked her long hair. Because Shan Cha was standing far away, and the mother and daughter were speaking softly, she thought that Miss Jiu's eyes were red, because she couldn't bear to part with her parents. Thus, she didn't notice that something was wrong with Chu Qingyan. Chu Qingyan suddenly remembered that there was an outsider beside her. She stood up straight and said to Shan Cha, Mother and I have some personal things to talk about. Go outside and guard the door for us. If anyone comes, knock on the door. Yes, Shan Cha answered and left, closing the door that was on the verge of collapsing. Chu Qingyan didn't expect Shan Cha to help her pass on the information. She was just using this opportunity to send her away. When only the three of them were left in the room, Chu Qingyan went straight to the point. Mother, don't you think it's a little strange? The Chu family didn't bring us to the capital because they missed us. Moreover, everyone's gazes at us are a bit strange. Taking a step back, the place I'm living in is obviously better than yours. This makes me feel that it's very unreasonable. Chapter 10. Kai, are you thinking too much? Mrs. Chu thought that her daughter was having these thoughts because she had just arrived in the capital from Mao village and was not used to it. She pinched her nose and laughed. Chu Qingyan shook her head and said seriously, Mother, I'm not thinking too much. I heard some clues from Shan Cha just now, so I think something big must have happened to the Chu family. Mrs. Chu could not help but ask, what big thing could have happened to the Chu family? What does it have to do with us? Chu Qingyan was instantly disheartened. This is also what I can't figure out. Mrs. Chu could not help but laugh. She touched her daughter's long hair. If you can't figure it out, then don't think about it. Since we're here, let's just take it as it comes. Chu Qingyan took a deep breath and nodded. At this moment, Mr. Chu came over and patted his chest to the mother and daughter. Dan Yang Kai, don't be afraid. I will protect you. Chu Qingyan and her mother looked at each other and could not help but laugh. Perhaps it was because she had been tense for the past few days, but Chu Qingyan felt a little sleepy. Mrs. Chu saw this and urged her to go back and rest. When Chu Qingyan left, she looked at the place where her parents lived and secretly decided that she must fight for the treatment that her parents deserved. Shan Cha felt that Miss Jiu's expression seemed to have changed when she came out of First Madam's room, but she could not put her finger on it. She wondered if she should tell Sister Primrose about Miss Jiu's abnormality. She thought that it would be difficult for her to fall asleep in an unfamiliar environment, but she did not expect to have a dreamless night. Chu Qingyan woke up early and Shan Cha had already prepared breakfast for her. She changed into the new clothes that the Chu family had prepared for her and sat down on the chair. When Shan Cha turned around to greet the ninth young mistress, she was stunned by her attire at this time. It was not because the ninth young mistress had a stunning appearance at this time, but because the ninth young mistress's clothes when she returned to the residence yesterday were very shabby, and the brilliance on her body seemed to be covered. But now, she was wearing a bright yellow spring dress, which brightened up her skin and made her look brand new. Chu Qingyan didn't miss the surprise in Shan Cha's eyes. She was happy and sad at the same time. She was happy because it was true that the saddle made the horse, and the clothes made the man. She was sad because if she was in the modern world, she wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. However, these thoughts were fleeting. After quietly finishing her meal, she told Shan Cha that she wanted to go out for a walk and familiarize herself with the environment. She noticed that Shan Cha hesitated for a moment, but eventually compromised under her sincere gaze. Chu Qingyan looked happy on the surface, but she began to mutter in her heart. After she went out, she found that there were many people outside her room overnight. Their eyes never left her, as if they were guarding her like a prisoner. This realization made her very surprised, but she still pretended that nothing was wrong. Shan Cha began to introduce the layout of the residence to her. Chu Qingyan listened and noted it down. Maybe it would be useful in the future. As they walked, they arrived at the garden. Chu Qingyan could vaguely see a few figures inside. She couldn't help but say to Shan Cha, "Let's go there for a walk." After spending a short time together, Shan Cha felt that although the ninth young mistress didn't talk much, she was easygoing. She liked her very much, so she brought her closer to the garden. When they went around a rockery and reached the pavilion in the garden, they suddenly heard such a conversation. "Seventh elder sister, I heard that the country bumpkin was brought back by second aunt. If it wasn't for the fact that I was in class yesterday, I would have gone to see what she looks like." An eager voice came from the back of the mountain. Shan Cha was stunned. She didn't expect the eighth young mistress to be there. While she was in a daze, Chu Qingyan grabbed her arm and squatted down under the rockery. She wanted to speak, but Chu Qingyan put her index finger on her lips, indicating that she shouldn't speak. The conversation continued on the rockery. "Eighth sister, what's so good about a country bumpkin? Isn't she ugly, stupid, and uneducated? Is this worth making a fuss about?" Another sarcastic voice replied pretentiously. Shan Cha subconsciously looked at the ninth young mistress, but found that she was extremely calm, as if the seventh young mistress and the eighth young mistress were talking about someone else. "Seventh elder sister, you're right. This kind of person is indeed not worthy of our attention. However, if she really doesn't have a good upbringing and marries into Prince Ying's household, wouldn't that be throwing away our Chu clan's face?" The eager voice had already turned to doubt. "Haha, eighth sister, if that country bumpkin doesn't marry, are you willing to marry? Don't forget that it was because grandmother didn't want our Chu family's girls to enter the wolf's den that she summoned the country bumpkin's family back. Otherwise, even if they starved or froze to death outside, it would have nothing to do with us." At this time, she mocked mercilessly. After waiting for so long, Chu Qingyan finally got the answer she wanted. Indeed, her entire family had been summoned back to the Chu clan. It wasn't because of the hypocrisy of blood ties, but because they wanted her to be the scapegoat. Marry? Would she be short of arms or legs? Or would she be a concubine? How good could the person who could make the entire Chu family unwilling to marry their daughter be? Chu Qingyan was so angry that she laughed. Ever since the seventh young mistress said those words, Shan Cha had been watching her closely, afraid that she would take things too hard and question the seventh young mistress. Fortunately, the ninth young mistress was very calm, but she revealed a creepy smile, which made people tremble with fear. Shan Cha didn't know how to face the ninth young mistress next, but she was unexpectedly covered by the ninth young mistress and pressed to a secluded place. Shan Cha was so scared that she wanted to struggle, but the ninth young mistress threatened her. "If you dare to move again, I can't guarantee what I will do." Shan Cha was only a little maid, so she was so scared that her legs turned to jelly, and she could only follow her forward. Chu Qingyan released Shan Cha and forced her to a corner. Then she took out a wooden stick that was as long as a palm, which was sharpened by her father in Mao village, and quickly pressed it against Shan Cha's waist. Finally, she revealed a sinister smile and threatened, "Shan Cha, I know you know what those two people said just now. Don't worry, I won't make things difficult for you. As long as you tell me what you know, I will let you go. Otherwise, I am a country bumpkin from the bottom of the mountain. If I panic and lose control of my strength, then you." The following words were self-evident. Shan Cha was frightened by her threat just now and the threat now. How could she dare to disobey? Ninth young mistress, I'll talk. Speak. I only know that His Majesty has issued an imperial edict for the Chu family's daughter to marry the current King of England, but the old master doesn't want to marry the young ladies. So the second madam wants to let the ninth young mistress and her family return to the Chu family, and then let the ninth young mistress marry the King of England. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. She was only 10 years old, okay? She was married before she grew up. These people in the Chu family were really ruthless. They were simply scum. Chapter 11. Why is the Chu family unwilling to marry their daughter to the King of England? What kind of person is the King of England? Is he an old man in his 70s or 80s? Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows and asked. No, no. Shan Cha immediately shook her head, and then looked at her carefully, not knowing if she should tell the truth. I want to hear the truth, or you know the consequences. Chu Qingyan said with a faint smile. Shan Cha immediately leaned against the wall and whispered. The King of England just turned 20 this year. It is said that he was disfigured by a fire when he was young, and became disgusting. He is cruel, cold-blooded and cruel. No woman in the capital dares to get close to him. It is said that anyone who has seen his real face will have nightmares in the middle of the night. Shan Cha saw that Miss Jiao's face suddenly darkened, and immediately shrank her neck, for fear that the sharp wood would hurt her accidentally. Chu Qingyan suddenly understood. No wonder even if he was the lord, the Chu family was so snobbish that they would rather push away the opportunity of marriage than grab it themselves. How could any parents be willing to push their daughter into the fire pit? But the most important thing for Chu Qingyan at this time was that the Chu family dragged her into the fire pit in order to save their daughter. This was simply unbearable. After laughing out of anger, Chu Qingyan became calmer. What else? She didn't believe that was all. Also, before His Majesty arranged a marriage for the King of England, but every time before the wedding, the bride suddenly died. Shan Cha's head hung lower, and she didn't dare to look at her at all. Chu Qingyan clenched her fingers and sneered. No wonder the King of England was nearly 20 years old, but still hadn't married. It turned out that this was the reason, because men in ancient times usually started to marry when they were 15 or 16 years old. Ugly face, evil spirit and wife jinx. What a Chu family! How could they be so crazy to drag a 10-year-old child to death? She didn't believe that he jinxed his wife. She could only say that the King of England was not simple. But this was not the place she wanted to think about. Who were the two people in the pavilion just now? Chu Qingyan continued to play with the wood in her hand and asked. Shan Cha replied weakly. It was Miss 7 and Miss 8. Seeing Miss Jiao looking at her with a frown, Shan Cha quickly explained the situation of the Chu family. The second master of the Chu family, Chu Zhiming, had two sons, Chu Dekhang and Chu Qinan, who were ranked first and second in the generation of grandchildren in the Chu family. The third master, Chu Zhihua, had one son and two daughters. The son was Chu Baoshi, the eldest daughter was Chu Yunyu, and the youngest daughter was Chu Yingyu, ranked 3rd, 7th and 8th respectively. The fourth master, Chu Zhiji, had one son and one daughter. The eldest daughter was Chu Lanyu, and the youngest son was Chu Songyi, ranked 4th and 5th respectively. So the Miss 7 and Miss 8 mentioned by Shan Cha referred to Chu Yunyu and Chu Yingyu. Chu Qingyan roughly went through these cousins in her mind, and she had a vague idea in her heart. The Chu family clearly had 3 daughters, and they were all older than her. But they couldn't bear to marry them off to be defiled, so they dragged her down as a scapegoat. They really didn't treat other people's daughters as humans. Chu Qingyan's fingertips rubbed the body of the stick, and there was a hint of anger on her face. After explaining the general situation of the Chu family, Shan Cha had been carefully paying attention to her expression. Seeing her frown, Shan Cha pursed her lips in fear. The 9th miss was clearly younger than her. But why did she have a kind of pressure that made people unable to breathe? Shan Cha muttered in her heart. But in the blink of an eye, the 9th miss's face was clear and cloudless again, and she recovered a faint smile on her face. Shan Cha suddenly felt gloomy behind her, as if there was a burst of cold wind blowing past. Well, the garden is almost done. Accompany me to see my parents. Chu Qingyan put away the sharp wooden stick, as if nothing had happened, and took the lead to walk out of the corner. Shan Cha widened her eyes and looked at the 9th miss, who was slowly pacing with her back on her back. She didn't understand why the 9th miss was so calm when she heard that she was going to marry the King of England. But at least this was better than crying and making a scene, and making the old madam unhappy. Although Shan Cha felt that the 9th miss was acting like this, she couldn't say why, and in the end, she obediently followed. Chu Qingyan's memory had always been good, so she quickly found the wing where her mother lived after making many turns. Shan Cha, on the other hand, followed behind her panting. Once they reached the door, Chu Qingyan instructed Shan Cha to guard outside and went straight into the room. Chu Qingyan's parents were very happy to see her, and they came forward to greet her warmly. However, Chu Qingyan looked around her and then pulled her parents to a chair to sit down. She frowned and thought about how to tell her mother about this. Chu Qingyan's mother was shocked by her daughter's serious expression and then asked, Kai, what's wrong? Chu Qingyan's face showed a touch of grief and anger, and then she lowered her voice. Mother, do you know the real reason why the Chu family brought us back? Because they want to play with us. Chu Qingyan's father immediately raised his hand and answered. Chu Qingyan pulled her father's hand down, annoyed and amused at the same time. She looked at her mother, whose expression had become serious, and said angrily, Mother, the Chu family brought us back not because they missed us, but because the higher-ups issued an imperial edict to marry the Chu family's daughter to the notorious King of England. The Chu family didn't want their daughter to suffer, so they thought of me. What? Chu Qingyan's mother stood up in shock, and her lips trembled as she said, You're only 10 years old. How could they do that? Chu Qingyan's father was stunned and he murmured, Kai, what's notorious? It means very, very bad. Chu Qingyan sighed and replied, That won't do. Dan Yang, our Kai won't marry a bad person. Chu Qingyan's father clenched his fists and said indignantly, Of course not. How can our Kai be humiliated like this? Although we're not doing well in Mao Village, at least we're happy and won't be used as scapegoats. I really regret agreeing to come back to the capital. Chu Qingyan's mother was so angry that she was trembling. Chu Qingyan immediately held her hand and comforted her. Mother, don't blame yourself. I think that even if we didn't agree to it, they would have found a way to kidnap us and bring us to the capital. So now that things have come to this, we should think of a way to solve this problem first. Chu Qingyan's mother, who had never encountered such a big problem, was flustered. She had no idea what to do at all. Tears welled up in her eyes and she choked out. But we're already in the Chu family. What can we do? Mother, although the imperial edict has been issued, there hasn't been any movement yet, has there? We can sneak away and not be discovered by the Chu family. This was the first thought that popped into her mind when she heard Shan Cha mention the bestowment of marriage. Escape? Chu Qingyan's mother widened her eyes in surprise. Yes, escape. As long as the Chu family can't find me, they'll find another daughter to marry. Otherwise, they'll be defying the imperial edict. I don't think they'll fail to understand the importance of this matter. Chu Qingyan said firmly. Okay. Kai, find a chance to escape. Don't worry about your father and me. As long as you escape, I'll be relieved. Chu Qingyan's mother said immediately. Chu Qingyan shook her head. No, mother. If we leave together. If we stay together. If I'm the only one who escapes, the Chu family won't let you and father off. Chu Qingyan's mother couldn't help but wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. She choked out, Okay. If we leave together. Although Chu Qingyan's father didn't understand what the mother and daughter were talking about, he also started crying. We have to stay together. Don't be separated. Mother, leave the matter of escaping from the Chu family to me. I'll arrange it. Chu Qingyan looked at her weak mother and ignorant father. Suddenly, she had a strong belief in herself. She had to protect her father and mother well. She wouldn't let them suffer any more hardships or grievances. Chapter 12. In the warm spring of March, the grass was long and the orioles were flying. The wind was gentle and warm. A dozen or so horses were galloping on the official road. Everyone on the horses was wearing a black bamboo hat with a high crown and wide brim. At the very front of the group was a tall and straight man in a black robe with a silver mask under his hat. Through the thin silk hanging down from the eaves, one could see a pair of black eyes that seemed to be filled with dense black clouds. It was a haze that couldn't be dispelled, and his lips were pursed, giving people a kind of cold and handsome misconception. Hua Ling beside him was reporting the secret reports of the past few days. Every time he finished reporting a matter, his eyes would become more and more gloomy. Lord, over the past few days, the entire capital has been fervently discussing your marriage with the Chu family. I'm afraid the news of your marriage has already spread through the entire Sichuan. The Empress is very angry and has sent 3 secret orders for you to quickly enter the palace for an audience. Recently, His Majesty has been in a very good mood and has rewarded our palace with many precious treasures. The retired emperor left the capital yesterday, and his whereabouts are unknown again. Water Spirit has also been unable to find a trace of him. Without a doubt, this cold-masked man with a gloomy expression was the cold-faced king of hell that Chu Qingyan had mentioned, the King of England, the eldest son of His Majesty and Empress Liang Xiao. Xiao smiled coldly. It seems like there are many pleasant surprises waiting for this king after returning to court this time. Huoling's face was filled with anger. Lord, we should have returned to court a few days ago, but His Majesty suddenly ordered us to suppress the bandits, causing you to miss the best opportunity to ask the retired emperor for mercy. Now the entire Sichuan knows that you are going to marry the daughter of the downtrodden Chu family. Those people in the palace must be laughing at you. How could Xiao not know this? It was because he knew it too well, that his mood was so terrible. The group had already arrived in the capital. Huoling looked at his cold master, and couldn't help but ask, Lord, how about we go to the palace first? Perhaps His Majesty can ask His Majesty to cancel the marriage. Xiao glanced at him and said, Do you think this is something that can be solved by pleading? Huoling was instantly stunned. Thinking of His Majesty's attitude towards his master, his heart turned cold. Seeing his master dismount and walk towards Winter Jasmine Court, Huoling immediately asked, Then master, you're not going into the palace to see the Empress first? There's no need for that. Conceal the whereabouts of this prince's return. Don't let anyone know. Yes, Huoling replied. Entering the Winter Jasmine courtyard through the back door, Xiao was greeted by a completely different scene from the bustling front yard. The backyard was cold and quiet, and as soon as Xiao appeared, 2 black-clothed men appeared at the top of the stairs. One of them bowed and said, Master, this subordinate has already informed Lady Xueling. She is currently waiting for you in the room. Xiao nodded and went up the stairs. Huoling and the others quickly followed. This was one of their secret strongholds. It was extremely obscure and no one knew about it. Once the door was pushed open, it was different from the other rooms that were filled with the scent of cosmetics. This room was simple and generous, faintly revealing a noble aura. A beauty in red stood in the middle of the room with a faint smile. Her naturally charming eyes and soft bones made people's hearts soften. However, when the beauty in red saw the person who came, the charming smile on her face immediately disappeared. The foxy charm had already been replaced by a stern expression. The frivolous smile turned into a respectful one. She stood up straight and knelt down. Water Spirit greets Lord. Rise, Xiao said in a low voice. He had already turned around and sat down on the main seat in the room, hearing her lord's calm tone. But after following him for so many years, she naturally knew that her master's expressionless cold mask seemed to have become even colder. Water Spirit couldn't help but look at Huoling standing to the side. Huoling met her gaze and shrugged. Water Spirit guessed that Lord's bad mood couldn't be separated from the marriage bestowed by the Chu family. She began to hesitate whether or not she should tell him the information she had just gathered. She knew that Lord would definitely fly into a rage because of the news she had just received. It didn't seem too optimistic. But even if Water Spirit didn't say it, Xiao would ask. Water Spirit, what is this marriage bestowed? Xiao coldly asked. He had just recovered his lost land and returned to court. He originally thought that he could have a few days of peace, but he didn't expect that what awaited him was an inexplicable marriage contract. Even if he rarely got angry, he couldn't help but feel a surge of anger in his heart. Hearing their lord's calm words, Huoling and Water Spirit couldn't help but tremble. They had followed Lord for so many years. Although they didn't understand their lord's thoughts, they knew very well that when their master's tone was low and calm, it meant that his mood was even worse. No one dared to stand out and be cannon fodder. It was just that Water Spirit, who had unfortunately been called out, had no choice but to take a step forward. Huoling on the side bared her teeth at her and pursed her lips into a smile, adding insult to injury. Water Spirit rolled her eyes at him, and then quickly went over the news she had received in her mind. Then she seriously reported, replying to Lord last month, retired Emperor returned to the palace, and said to His Majesty that Your Majesty is almost 20 years old, and that it's time to start a family. If you don't take a wife, no one will want you. Then, under His Majesty's inquiry, retired Emperor calculated with his fingers that the Chu family has a clever and obedient girl who is suitable to be the first prince's wife. Thus, His Majesty decided to draft an imperial marriage decree that day. One was already issued to the Chu family last month, and the other was waiting for Your Majesty to return to court. After saying this, Water Spirit unconsciously looked at Lord in front of her. It seemed like the silver mask on Lord's face had become even colder. No one wants her. Calculated with his fingers? The corner of Xiaosu's mouth twitched. Did Imperial Grandfather learn some kind of messy fortune-telling technique again? Normally, he would scam those ignorant commoners. But this time, he even scammed his own grandson. But when he heard Water Spirit mention that the Sichuan Emperor had issued an imperial edict to the Chu family that day, his lips tightened. Chu family? Xiaosu muttered. If it wasn't for this marriage decree, he would have already forgotten about this Chu family. That family that was once well known in Sichuan country had fallen in the great battle 10 years ago. Lord, Water Spirit didn't know if she should mention this, but as a responsible subordinate, Water Spirit felt that she had to report the news she had just received to her lord. What is it? Xiaosu glanced at her. Lord, when the Chu family found out that His Majesty had bestowed a marriage decree, not only did they not express their gratitude, they even fainted on the spot before they could receive Matriarch Chu. Water Spirit's tone was filled with resentment. These people really didn't know what was good for them. Their lord had a noble status, and in their hearts, he was a godlike existence. But now, he was being disdained like this. Water Spirit's eyes burned with anger. When Water Spirit brought up this topic, Xiaosu only frowned slightly. It wasn't that he didn't know about his reputation in the capital city. He was vicious and frighteningly ugly. There were even rumors that he was a jinx to his wife, so he wasn't surprised by the Chu family's attitude. In the entire capital city, no, in the entire Sichuan, there was probably no one who would dare to marry their daughter to such a notorious man. Seeing that her lord's expression didn't change, Water Spirit recalled the information she had just read in the letter. She felt even more indignant for her mistress, so she continued to speak. It's fine if the Chu family doesn't know what's good for them, but they actually ignored the girls in the residence, who are already of marriageable age. Instead, they chose that ninth young miss who popped out of nowhere, who isn't even 26 years old, to be His Majesty's betrothed. They've gone too far. Xiaosu frowned and his tone sank. Not even 26 years old? Chapter 13. Water Spirit looked at her master's dark expression and nodded. She wanted to say something, but paused. She was thinking of what to say to make her master no longer angry. At this time, Hualing was the first to speak, his tone filled with anger. This Chu family really doesn't put our lord in their eyes. They're just a small declining family, yet they dare to disobey the imperial edict and publicly disrespect the lord. Lord, have Hualing bring people to teach them a lesson. Let's see if they still dare to insult you like this. Hualing bowed to his lord. Then he picked up his weapon and walked out. Stop. Xiaosu spoke, his voice carrying an unquestionable command. Hualing was unwilling, but his body obediently stopped. He angrily looked at his lord and said with a bit of injustice, Lord, what are you going to do? Xiaosu looked at him and picked up the teacup on the table. The dark expression on his face was slowly hidden by the dense tea. Hualing was stunned by his master's casual question. Xiaosu took a sip of tea, before his eyes fell on his subordinate in front of him. He said in a faint voice, Could it be that you want to wash the Chu family in blood? Then the entire city will start talking about the King of England's violent and cruel actions? If you really want to do that, this king doesn't care. Hualing was stunned, but then he reacted when Water Spirit rolled her eyes. He immediately knelt down and asked for forgiveness. Lord, this subordinate was not considerate, and almost implicated you. This subordinate asks for punishment. Water Spirit did not agree with Hualing's actions, but she still went forward to plead. Lord, although Hualing is a bit impulsive, he is still loyal. Please don't be angry. Xiao waved his hand. Stand up. Hualing and Water Spirit looked at each other before standing up. Lord was already a bit angry, but now he looked like nothing had happened. This made these two trusted aides who had been by Lord's side since they were young confused. Lord, could it be that we're going to let this small Chu family bully us like this? Although Hualing had acted on impulse, Xueling's heart was also filled with anger. His Majesty didn't like the fact that His Highness had personally arranged this marriage, but now this Chu family dared to hit him while he was down. Xueling couldn't help but complain. What's the matter? Hualing's heart was filled with anger. His Majesty didn't like the fact that His Highness had personally arranged this marriage, but now this Chu family actually dared to hit him while he was down. Xueling couldn't help complaining. The corners of Xiao's mouth lifted, revealing a faint trace of ridicule. The imperial edict only bestowed a marriage to the Chu family, but it didn't mention any of the young misses. Even if imperial father were to hear this, the Chu family would still be in the right. Hualing gripped the sword hilt in his hand and said in an aggrieved voice, Your Highness, are we just going to let this go? Suffer in silence. Xiao knit his brows and then turned to look at the darkening sky. His dark eyes became even darker. He slowly opened his mouth and said in a light tone, Don't forget the last few times. It was unknown if the Chu family's miss could live until that day. However, it looks like the Chu family is also a choice. Otherwise, they would still be thinking about this king's concubine position. It doesn't matter who they choose. It doesn't make any difference to this king. These calm words made Water Spirit and Hualing's eyes turn red. They instantly looked away. Water Spirit bit her lip, but she was so angry that she could not speak. Lord had lived a hard life these past few years. They all saw it with their own eyes. She really felt that it was not worth it for her lord. The room was silent for a moment. No one spoke. Water Spirit looked at her master, who was deep in thought, and moved her eyes. Lord, why don't we go to the Chu family and see that young miss? I heard that she was resting outside, and was only brought back to the Chu family a few days ago. Just a 10-year-old child, what is there to see? Hualing couldn't help muttering. Water Spirit looked at him. Don't speak nonsense. She will be our princess in the future. Also, aren't you just a few years older than her? It's still a few years older. I can protect Master, but what can she do? It can't be that Master needs to coax her when the time comes. She's just a little girl. Hualing was a bit disdainful. He took out his anger on Chu Qingyan for what the Chu family had done. Water Spirit shook her head. She turned to her lord and said, Although she's just a 10-year-old girl, let's go take a look. We should have an idea in our hearts. Xiao raised his brows. 10 years old. He couldn't help thinking of the little girl named Kai he met a few days ago. He didn't know if she would have a good life after receiving those banknotes. Once this thought appeared, he quickly put it down. She had saved him, and he had given her the money she needed the most right now. So they were even. He, Xiao, didn't want to owe people favors the most. Since there's nothing to do, it's good to go for a walk. He wanted to refuse, but after thinking about it, Xiao still nodded and stood up. Hualing's lips twitched when he heard this. Lord, how could there be nothing to do? The Empress should be anxiously waiting in the imperial palace. But seeing that Lord didn't have any thoughts of entering the palace, Hualing couldn't help closing his mouth and quickly following. Water Spirit let out a sigh of relief. She finally managed to convince Lord to go out for a walk. After changing into a set of black clothes, she picked out a few people and brought them along, following the two in front of her. So the group of people in black clothes disappeared into the night. The Chu family's old residence. After Shan Cha fell asleep, Chu Qingyan tiptoed out of the room, avoiding the spies that Second Aunt had set up nearby. Following the route that she had been scouting for the past few days, she carefully walked towards her parents' room. 2 short knocks and 1 long knock on the door. This was the secret signal she had agreed on with her mother. Very quickly, the door was opened from the inside. Mother Chu poked her head out. and happily let her daughter into the room. She looked her up and down. Kai, you haven't come over these past few days. Did they make things difficult for you? Chu Qingyan stepped into the room and immediately closed the door. Hearing her mother's words, she smiled and shook her head. They didn't make things difficult for me, but they didn't let me go out. They didn't skimp on my food or drink. That's good, that's good. Mother Chu let out a sigh of relief. At this time Father Chu, who had been playing by himself, saw his daughter come over and immediately jumped forward. He happily pulled his daughter's hand and twirled her in circles. Kai, you're here. As soon as she saw her parents, Kai's mood was exceptionally good. She gently pulled on her father's hand and smiled. Father, your daughter is here. Mother Chu couldn't help but smile when she saw this. Kai, you don't know this, but your father has been making a fuss about wanting to see you these past few days. I had to persuade him in every possible way to stop him. Otherwise, he would have run off to look for you like a wisp of smoke. Chu Qingyan looked at her silly father and felt touched. She shook her head. Your daughter sneaked out to see father and mother this time. Before we escape from the Chu family, it's best that we don't meet in public. Otherwise, we'll attract the Chu family's attention. Then Kai sneaked out tonight. Did you come up with a plan? Mother Chu's eyes lit up. Chu Qingyan pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes were full of slyness, of course. The room was filled with joy, but they didn't notice the strange look that flashed across the dark, glassy eyes outside the room. Chapter 14. Kai, what's your plan? Chu Qingyan's mother was pleasantly surprised. She couldn't help but hold her daughter's hand and ask with a smile. Chu Qingyan's father could feel the joy of the whole family, and also held his daughter's hand to dance. Chu Qingyan was affected by her parents and was in a good mood. However, she quickly calmed down and looked around cautiously. After making sure that no one was eavesdropping, she leaned close to her mother's ear and whispered, Mother, isn't Granduncle's 70th birthday in a few days? It'll be very lively in the residence with gifts and ingredients coming in and out. We'll take advantage of the chaos and escape through the back door. I've already found a few sets of Xiaoxi's servant girl clothes. We won't be discovered if we disguise ourselves. Chu Qingyan's mother's eyes lit up, and she immediately nodded. However, she was still a little worried. That's a good idea, but I don't know if it'll be so successful. Chu Qingyan smiled slightly. Mother, how will we know if it'll be successful if we don't try? As long as there's a chance, there's hope. Besides, the current situation is already the worst. If we're caught, will it get worse? The Chu family needs me to be the scapegoat, so they won't dare to make a move on me unless they're willing to push their beautiful daughter into the tiger's den. Chu Qingyan's mother finally relaxed when she heard her daughter's solemn vow. However, looking at her obedient and sensible daughter, Chu Qingyan's mother couldn't help but feel sad. She raised her hand and stroked her daughter's face, which was slowly becoming fair and tender. She said with pity, Mother is useless. A young girl like you should be living a carefree life instead of being embroiled in such a storm and worrying day and night. His Royal Highness wasn't like this when he was young. I don't know what happened after that, but now his reputation is so bad. Mother doesn't dare to let you take this risk. If I had the ability to protect you, you wouldn't have to suffer like this. Chu Qingyan knew that her mother was blaming herself again. She grinned and shook her head. Mother, life is like this. If you don't abuse others, it won't be at ease. Moreover, I've never felt that this kind of life is bad. Whether it's wealth or poverty, it's not important. What's important is that we're together as a family. Mrs. Chu was very pleased that her daughter was so sensible. Mr. Chu raised his hand to wipe the tears from the corners of Mrs. Chu's eyes and said seriously, Danyang, don't worry. If anyone bullies you, I won't let them off. I'm a mighty tiger. Awoo. Poochie. Chu Qingyan and her mother laughed together. She didn't know why, but every time in a very serious situation, her father always had the potential to make people laugh. After discussing the details with her mother and confirming the time of departure, Chu Qingyan quietly left the room and walked towards her own small courtyard. Hualing glared at Chu Qingyan and angrily said in a small voice, This little girl really doesn't know what's good for her. She actually dares to run away from the marriage? Water Spirit was watching with great interest. When she heard Hualing say this, she couldn't help glancing at him. Don't you feel it? Although this little girl is young, she does things very methodically and meticulously. She doesn't seem like a 10-year-old child at all. I think that as long as she's properly trained, her future will be limitless. Although he could see it, as long as he thought of her running away, he would be filled with anger. Their respected lord was actually being disdained like this. How could he be happy? But Hualing forgot that in the capital, there wasn't a single family that dared to marry their daughter to their lord. There wasn't a single girl that didn't fear their lord. Just as Hualing was about to retort, he saw his lord's body move. He was still heading in the direction that the little girl left in. After Hualing and Shui Ling exchanged a glance, they immediately flew up to keep up. The little figure cautiously moved forward in the dark night, not noticing at all that there was a large group of black-clothed people following behind her. Chu Qingyan went back the way she came, but when she was halfway there, several servants carrying lanterns walked in front of her. This place was a wall, and there was no place to hide. Chu Qingyan secretly cursed in her heart. If she was discovered at this time, then her following plan would have to be put on hold, because the Chu family would strictly watch over her. While Chu Qingyan was in a daze and didn't know how to react, the servants in front of her suddenly gave a few groans before falling to the ground like they were drunk. Chu Qingyan was stunned by this unexpected turn of events. She immediately reacted and gave her thanks in a low voice. Then, without caring about anything else, she ran towards her own courtyard. No matter how stupid she was, she could guess that there was someone nearby. She didn't know if they were friend or foe, but there was no doubt that they had saved her. But at this critical moment, she didn't want to be involved with anyone else. After Chu Qingyan left, a person walked out from where she had been standing. He was wearing an exquisite black robe and a silver mask. Under the moonlight, there was a layer of hazy light on the mask, making it impossible for people to see the expression in his eyes. Lord, why are you helping this girl who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? Hualing jumped out and asked in confusion. Xiao Su didn't answer, but this question reminded him of what Chu Qingyan had said to her parents in the room. Wealth or poverty, it wasn't important. What was important was being together as a family. Xiao Su's lips slightly hooked, but there was a bit of self-mockery in his smile. Seeing his lord remain silent, Hualing tactfully didn't ask any more questions. But he still held a grudge against Chu Qingyan. She actually didn't put their lord in her eyes, and even dared to run away from the marriage. The next time he saw her, he would definitely teach her a lesson. Water Spirit, send someone to guard the Chu family. If the Chu family's young miss wants to leave, have someone secretly escort them. Xiao Su looked in the direction Chu Qingyan had left and lightly said. There was no emotion in his voice. What? Before Water Spirit could respond, Hualing had already jumped up. Lord, what are you saying? If this little girl really runs away, then wouldn't this marriage be a joke? Xiao Su looked at him, and Hualing immediately fell silent. You want to question this king's orders? His calm tone made people feel an inexplicable sense of fear. Hualing lowered his head and pursed his lips. This subordinate doesn't dare. This subordinate only feels that it's not worth it for Lord. This king doesn't want to owe anyone a favor, nor does he want to drag anyone into a sea of fire. If this one doesn't work, then we can just change to another one. It's not a problem for the Chu family at all. As for this king, it doesn't matter. A simple and pure person shouldn't step into a complicated whirlpool. She was still a child, so the peaceful and comfortable life of Mao Village was more suitable for her. That's right, he recognized her. But there was no need to acknowledge her. Because there was no need. It was just a chance meeting. He was willing to return her favor, so they were truly even. Xiao Su indifferently turned and left. Water Spirit poked Hualing. Could it be that Lord knows this Chu family's young miss? Hualing unhappily replied. Only the heavens know. I know I'm about to explode from anger. Water Spirit curled her lips. Then you can slowly be angry. I'm going back with Lord. Hualing gave a snort, and immediately followed. Once the wheel of fate began to turn, it could not be stopped. When fate intertwined, it was destined. Chapter 15. The days passed one by one, and the entire Chu family was busy preparing for Old Master Chu's 70th birthday. If this had happened in the past, it wouldn't have been so lively. However, because the young miss of the Chu clan had been betrothed to King Ying, the Chu clan was able to bask in the limelight. Those high officials and nobles who usually didn't interact with the Chu clan all sent over invitations one after another, wanting to curry favor with the Chu clan. This gave the Chu clan a lot of face, so Old Master Chu waved his hand and organized this birthday banquet without restraint. But it was also because of this that Chu Qingyan took advantage of this opportunity. She knew that on the day of the birthday banquet, the entire Chu family would be filled with people and carriages. At that time, the chances of her and her parents escaping would greatly increase. Chu Qingyan looked calm on the surface, but her heart had already become impatient because of the approaching date. She was looking forward to it, but there was also a faint fear. That was the fear of the unknown. But fortunately, she was only a child, and no one would notice the change in her mood. But she could feel that the guards in the courtyard were slowly becoming lax. She guessed that it was because tomorrow was Old Master Chu's 70th birthday, and there wasn't enough manpower, so they were transferred away. Although she thought like this, Chu Qingyan's heart was still faintly uneasy. She raised her head to look at the gradually darkening sky, and there was an indescribable feeling in her heart. But tomorrow was their chance to escape, so no matter what happened, she couldn't change her decision. So she carried a bundle and secretly opened the window. When there was no one around, she stepped on the dressing chair and climbed out with great effort. She couldn't escape tonight, but she had to send the disguise she prepared in the past few days to her parents' room. Otherwise, it would be too late to wear it tomorrow. What Chu Qingyan didn't know was that when she left in the dark, the person hiding in the corner revealed a malicious smile, and then sneakily followed her. Sir Hualing, the Chu family's young miss seems to be targeted. The black-clothed person on the eaves looked at the large group of people below, and couldn't help but report to the person in front of him. What does it have to do with me? Hualing lowered his head to look at the small and thin figure moving through the small path, and revealed a look of disdain. A drop of cold sweat appeared on the black-clothed man's forehead. Sir Hualing, are you sure you're here to protect the Chu family's young miss? You promised Water Spirit that everything would be fine. That's why she allowed you to come to the Chu estate tonight. If anything goes wrong, you'll probably be dismembered by Water Spirit. Seeming to sense his subordinate's strange expression, Hualing finally reacted. He had actually spoken the truest thoughts in his heart. He coughed twice before giving the order. The Chu family's young miss seems to be in danger. Let's quickly go and take a look. Another drop of cold sweat appeared on the black-clothed man's forehead. Sir Hualing's face changed too quickly. Chu Qingyan had no idea that danger was approaching bit by bit. When Chu Qingyan's mother opened the door, Chu Qingyan saw her mother and wanted to go forward happily. However, she saw that her mother's face suddenly turned pale. Just as she was puzzled, a bright red flame spread out from behind her, elongating her figure in front of her, reflecting her mother's frightened eyes. There was only one word left in Chu Qingyan's heart at this moment. Shit. She had been discovered. As if confirming her thoughts, a voice with a knife hidden in a smile sounded from behind her. Qingyan, why aren't you sleeping at night? What are you doing here? It was Second Aunt's voice. Chu Qingyan was stunned. She immediately tightened the bag in her hands, and the panic on her face disappeared. She used her eyes to comfort her mother in front of her, before calmly turning around. The bag in her hands was also placed on her back. Chu Qingyan smiled as she turned around. Coincidentally, her eyes met with Second Aunt's fake smile, under the illumination of the torches. The mockery in her eyes seemed even more sinister in the dark night. Chu Qingyan glanced around, and saw that the shabby little house was already surrounded by servants. Chu Qingyan understood immediately. It seemed like they were prepared this time, and were waiting for her to walk right into their trap. She raised her eyebrows, and did not know where she had exposed herself. Second Aunt, niece hasn't seen father and mother for a long time, so I specially came to visit them. Since the other party asked the obvious, then she would also lie through her teeth. Haha. Madame Xing walked forward with her head maidservant Primrose supporting her. She approached step by step like a yiksha in the dark, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws as she approached her prey. Qingyan, do you really think I'm blind? Don't think that I didn't see the bag in your hands. Primrose. The cold smile on Madame Xing's face turned into ruthless mockery. Chu Qingyan couldn't help but take a step back when she suddenly spoke. However, she was too small and didn't have enough strength. The bag in her hands couldn't escape Primrose's interception and was snatched away. Open it. Madame Xing snorted coldly. Primrose immediately pulled open the bag, and the 2 pieces of clothing inside fell to the ground. Madame Xing lifted her foot and stepped on the 2 pieces of maidservant and manservant clothing. She looked down at Chu Qingyan and said with a faint smile, Qingyan, tell me, why did you bring these clothes to visit your father and mother in the middle of the night? Chu Qingyan frowned as she looked at the clothes that were already stained with footprints. However, a pitiful expression had already replaced her face. Second aunt, Qingyan saw that father and mother couldn't eat well and wear warm clothes, so Qingyan thought of bringing these clothes for father and mother to wear. Second aunt, please don't blame me. Madame Xing turned to look at her eldest sister-in-law with a disdainful gaze. Eldest sister-in-law, do you think that the Chu family has mistreated you? They actually let Qingyan do such a sneaky thing. If news of this spread, the Chu family's reputation will be tarnished. You also came from a large household. Why didn't you even consider this point? Second aunt, you're not allowed to talk about my mother like that. Chu Qingyan suppressed her emotions and said with a pout. Children shouldn't interrupt when adults are talking. Madame Xing glared at him angrily. Qingyan's mother hurriedly stepped forward to protect her daughter. Her lips trembled as she said, Second sister-in-law, I didn't educate Qingyan well. Don't blame her. Mother. Chu Qingyan felt a little sad. Madame Chu shook her head at her. At this time, it would be best if they could get away with it. Otherwise, who knew what kind of punishment awaited their family? Chu Qingyan could understand her mother's intention to keep the peace. However, she knew that this matter wouldn't be so simple. Otherwise, second aunt wouldn't have specially waited here. As expected, Madame Xing pretended to be in a difficult position and shook her head. Eldest sister-in-law, it's not that I don't want to help you, but father and mother already know about this matter. So I'll have to trouble you to come with me now. Chu Qingyan's mother's face immediately turned pale. Chu Qingyan clenched her fists. It seemed that they couldn't avoid this calamity. Chapter 16. Chu Qingyan, together with Chu Mu's mother and the bewildered Chu Mu's father, were escorted to the front hall. The originally quiet Chu residence was now brightly lit. Chu Qingyan raised her head to look at Old Master Chu and Old Madam Chu, who were sitting upright in the main seat, waiting for her family to walk into the tiger's den. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, revealing a hint of mockery. It seemed that they had put in a lot of effort to make her family submit. Huayuan family, our Chu family has not mistreated you. Why do you have to do such a disgraceful thing? Old Madam Chu spoke harshly, taking the initiative to strike first. Old Master Chu, on the other hand, was like an old man in meditation, looking at them coldly. Uncle, aunt, father and mother did not intend to do anything detrimental to the Chu family. It was really because Qingyan saw that father and mother's clothes were tattered, that she wanted to give them clothes to wear. We did not intend to ruin the Chu family's reputation. Chu Qingyan immediately threw herself onto the ground, looking pitifully at the people seated. That's right, uncle, aunt, Qingyan is also being filial. Please do not blame her. She is still young and has not thought things through. If you must punish her, please punish Dan Yang. Chu Mu's mother also immediately stepped forward to plead for leniency. Do you really think that I am old and have bad eyesight? That I can't even tell the difference between real and fake? Old Madam Chu snorted coldly, then waved her hand. Someone bring Shancha up. Shancha. Chu Qingyan's eyebrows twitched. It seemed that the heavens wanted her dead. At this moment, under the lead of a large servant girl, the skinny Shancha walked out, trembling with fear. The moment she saw Chu Qingyan, she immediately lowered her head, not daring to look at her. At this moment, Madame Xing smiled and said, Shan Cha, tell everyone what you know. Shan Cha shuddered as she looked at Chu Qingyan. She immediately lowered her eyes and said, These few days, Shan Cha noticed that ninth young mistress was behaving strangely, so I paid more attention to her. The day before yesterday, I discovered that ninth young mistress was actually hiding the servants' clothes. Shan Cha thought that ninth young mistress was doing it for fun, but after a while, I felt that something was amiss. This servant noticed that ninth young mistress was actually packing and seemed to be trying to escape. I immediately reported this to second madam, and ninth young mistress indeed secretly brought the clothes to first old master and first madam. Shan Cha's words undoubtedly confirmed Chu Qingyan's intention to escape. This left Chu Qingyan speechless. Qingyan, the evidence is irrefutable, and there are witnesses as well. What else do you want to deny? Old Madam Chu looked at her viciously. Madam Xing, Madam Wang, and the others who were standing at the side were all gloating over their misfortune. They all looked at them, as if they were waiting to watch a good show. Qingyan, you better confess honestly. Did your mother instruct you to do this? Otherwise, how would you dare to do such a daring thing at such a young age? Madam Wang said coldly as she blew on her nails. Chu Qingyan felt the malice coming from all sides, and the anger in her heart suddenly settled down. She raised the corner of her mouth, and a trace of coldness flashed past her eyes. Shan Cha accidentally caught a glimpse of this scene, and shivered all over. Miss Jill looked so scary. She began to wonder if she was right to snitch on her. Just when everyone present was waiting for a good show, a voice that seemed to be laughing yet not laughing sounded out at an inappropriate time. Madam Chu, I really gave you some color, and you opened a dye house. Even if you give an inch and want a mile, you don't have to do this. What? Madam Chu widened her eyes and exclaimed. The Chu family was shocked. Chapter 17. No one had expected that there would be someone who dared to openly defy the head of the Chu family on this occasion. But even if no one had expected it, there was still someone who did it. And the person who did it was none other than the little country bumpkin, who had just been brought back to the Chu family. Thus, everyone was simultaneously shocked on the spot. Chu Qingyan slowly stood up, and the panic and fear on her face had already disappeared. Instead, a calmness that did not match her age appeared on her face, along with a faint smile. Old Madam Chu fiercely slapped the back of the chair. Vile spawn, what did you just say? Vile spawn? Chu Qingyan raised the corner of her mouth. Did she really think of herself as Tang Sanzang? That everyone had to worship her mother? Aunt, Qingyan respects you as an elder, and has been courteous to you for many days. After all, respecting the elderly and loving the young is a virtue that has been passed down since ancient times. Unfortunately, why can't I see the words loving the young on you? Could it be that only the younger generation has to abide by etiquette, while the elders can wantonly disregard it? Chu Qingyan did not conceal her sharpness anymore. She stood in the hall gracefully, and no longer bent her back slightly. If they continued to compromise at this time, then what awaited them would be an even more severe punishment. You. Perhaps it was because she had lived for so long, but she had never seen a younger generation of the Chu family contradicting her like this. Old Madam Chu was so angry that she could not even speak clearly. Seeing this, Madam Xing immediately stood up and said sternly, Chu Qingyan, what nonsense are you spouting? Old Madam dotes on your family of three very much. Otherwise, she would not have brought you back to the Chu family and let you suffer a life of hunger and cold outside. Chu Qingyan, don't be ungrateful and bite the hand that feeds you. The moment Madam Xing finished speaking, Madam Wang also echoed, that's right. Chu Qingyan, why aren't you hurrying to apologize to old Madam? If not for old Madam, how could you live such a luxurious life? Dotes on you? A life of luxury? Chu Qingyan used an extremely slow tone to mull over these words. Her words carried a heavy meaning that was hard to discern. This caused the members of the Chu clan to involuntarily frown. In the end, Chu Qingyan lightly snorted. Her clear eyes were like a mirror. For a moment, the members of the Chu clan felt as if they had nowhere to hide. Instead of saying that you don't know how to appreciate kindness, It's better to say that you're a weasel paying a visit to a chicken. You're up to no good. Chu Qingyan, what did you say? Old Master Chu, who had been watching from the sidelines, could no longer remain calm. Chu Qingyan glanced at them with a mocking look in her eyes. It's not true that you miss our family of 3. You're just trying to trick us into coming back. Aren't you my dear granduncle and aunt? Ah. Everyone was once again stunned by Chu Qingyan's unexpected words. What nonsense are you talking about? Don't listen to the servant's nonsense. Even though she knew that the other party already knew, old Madame Chu still wanted to use her status as an elder to suppress this matter. Unfortunately, reality did not go as she wished. The voice that was strong on the outside, but weak on the inside, was completely powerless to change the situation. Chu Qingyan raised her brows and swept her gaze across the people present. She only saw that they were all looking at each other, trying to evade the question of who had revealed the truth. Chu Qingyan felt a wave of irritation in her heart. She no longer wanted to waste time tangling with these people. Old Madame Chu, let's not beat around the bush. This marriage was promised to the Chu clan by His Majesty. As early as 10 years ago, you had already chased our family of 3 out of the Chu clan and struck my father's name off the family tree. Logically speaking, we're no longer a part of the Chu clan. So if you want me to take the blame, isn't that committing the crime of deceiving the monarch? The quiet hall was stirred up by Chu Qingyan's words. Because she had pointed out a fact that everyone had overlooked, it was also the cause of the disaster. Old Madame Chu and Old Master Chu, who were still angry at Chu Qingyan for speaking rudely, immediately quivered. The 2 of them looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. Chu Qingyan was right. Their family of 3 was no longer in the family tree. And this time, they had reported Chu Qingyan's name to His Majesty for the marriage. If His Majesty investigated, there would definitely be no way to hide the truth. This was a great crime that could lead to the extermination of the entire family. Seeing the Chu clan lose their heads out of fear, Chu Qingyan shook her head. They were really a group of people who only cared about small benefits and ignored the people behind them. Old Madame Chu clenched her handkerchief tightly, her heart in a mess. But in the blink of an eye, she saw Chu Qingyan standing in the hall indifferently, and suddenly came up with a plan. Qingyan, you also know that if the Chu clan is held accountable, your family of 3 will not be able to escape the crime of being beheaded. After all, your name has already been reported. Since that's the case, why don't we think of a compromise? Your father also wants to return to the family tree. If you agree, Aunt will let your uncle find the Chu clan's elders and add your father's name back. What do you think? Chu Qingyan curved the corners of her mouth. Old Madame Chu's words were exactly what she wanted. Just now she laid the matter out. One of her goals was to let her father return to the family tree, but she wanted to get back for her parents more than this. Seeing that Chu Qingyan did not respond, old Madame Chu gave Madame Xing, who was seated below, a look. Madame Xing received her signal and immediately understood. She smiled at Chu Qingyan and said, Qingyan, you see, not only can your parents return to the Chu clan, but the Chu clan has also found a good marriage for you. Who doesn't know that the King of England is brave and good at fighting, and has a high status? If you marry him, you will enjoy supreme nobility. This is a good thing that many girls in the Sichuan can't even dream of. Second aunt, although Qingyan is only 10 years old, she is not stupid. The King of England has a bad reputation. If he is really as good as you say, there will be nothing for Qingyan. So even if father and mother don't return to the Chu clan for the rest of their lives, they will not have the heart to push Qingyan into the fire pit. Aunt, you are not the only way to let father return to the family tree. So uncle, aunt, you should think of another way. Forgive Qingyan for not being able to accompany you. Chu Qingyan looked at Madame Xing with a smile. Her eyes were clear and bright, and Madame Xing could not help but look away. She was secretly shocked. Were these still the eyes of a 10-year-old child? Chu Qingyan, Buddha said that sacrifice yourself to achieve the greater good. How can you abandon the Chu clan? At this time, a group of young boys and girls walked in, and the young man standing in front looked at her disapprovingly. Chu Qingyan glanced at the young man who spoke just now, When she heard him speak, she knew who he was. It was her second cousin Chu Ansuan. She responded with a faint smile. Second cousin. Buddha said that if I don't go to hell, who will? Then why don't you go to hell? Why don't you let your biological sister go to hell? Without waiting for Chu Ansuan's expression to change, Chu Qingyan turned to take her parents' hands and walked out. Chu Qingyan, do you think you can walk out of this door? Old Master Chu put down his teacup heavily, his anger spilling out. Chapter 18. It was rare to see Old Master Chu so angry, so everyone was a little scared. However, there was one person who didn't care about his anger at all. Chu Qingyan stopped when she heard this. Old Master Chu thought that he had scared her, and was feeling a little smug. However, he saw Chu Qingyan turn around with a smile that didn't match her age. It was a little strange and confused him. Uncle, I'm afraid you can't decide whether I can leave this place. What do you mean by that? Old Madam Chu frowned, and looked at her with dissatisfaction. Chu Qingyan smiled but didn't say anything. At this moment, the young men and women behind Chu Ansuan saw that Chu Qingyan dared to talk back to her grandparents and even threaten them. Chu Yunyu, who disliked Chu Qingyan the most, stood up and said, Chu Qingyan, don't be so ungrateful. If it weren't for the Chu family, you would still be in some mountain digging for wild vegetables and chewing on tree bark. That's right, that's right. Chu Yunyu stood next to her elder sister and swore with her. She glared at Chu Qingyan. It was only now that Chu Qingyan noticed that the two maidservants who had been badmouthing her in the back of the mountain were here as well. Chu Yunyu was dressed in an emerald green blouse with green peaches embroidered on the hem of her skirt. Chu Yunyu was dressed in a light orange blouse with vivid kumquats embroidered on the hem of her skirt. Although the two of them were over 27 or 26 years old, they were already showing signs of romance. As the two of them stood side by side, it gave people the illusion that they were dressed in green and yellow. Unfortunately, the two of them glared at her fiercely. Chu Qingyan felt that no matter how beautiful the scene in front of her was, she couldn't bring herself to appreciate it. Since the two of you feel that it's a pity, why don't I give up my position and return this rare opportunity to you too? This opportunity never belonged to me in the first place. Chu Qingyan replied very politely. There was no hint of mockery in her voice at all. Chu Yunyu didn't expect to be checkmated by this little country bumpkin. She was angry at such a young age, but she couldn't find any words to refute. After all, Chu Qingyan had stepped on her sore spot. A few juniors were arguing below, which made old Madame Chu frown. Her stern voice fell heavily. Her eyes were locked on Chu Qingyan, who was standing below at ease. Chu Qingyan, you have to understand that you're now a grasshopper tied on a rope with us. If anything happens to us, you and your parents. Chu Qingyan knew that old Madame Chu would threaten her with her parents, but she had already thought of a countermeasure. She fearlessly looked at old Madame Chu's majesty, which had been condensed over the years. Aunt, it seems that elders like you always like to ignore some seemingly unimportant, but actually very important things. She paused for a moment. When she saw that she had successfully attracted everyone's attention, she continued unhurriedly. Firstly, the marriage was arranged by the Chu family. It has nothing to do with this junior and mother. To put it in a deeper sense, our family of three is the victim. Secondly, if this junior doesn't agree to this marriage, I'm afraid that the Chu family will face a situation where their heads fall to the ground. So, now it's not a matter of whether I can walk out of this door or not, but whether your Chu family can live to see the sun tomorrow. She analyzed layer by layer, and succeeded in making everyone's faces change. It was not that they didn't think of these, but that they deliberately ignored them. The faces of old Master Chu and old Madam of the Chu family changed from blue to white, which was very interesting. Madam Xing and the others also didn't look good, but the younger generation of the Chu family seemed to be scared by Chu Qingyan's threat of beheading. Looking at her daughter in the hall, who looked calm, old Madam Chu's worry gradually dissipated. So what if she had a daughter? What more could she ask for? Chu Qian's father felt that his daughter's every word had silenced the bad guy, which was quite awe-inspiring. He immediately puffed out his chest and stood behind his daughter. He raised his chin high and looked at everyone with pride, as if this was his daughter, the good daughter that he had given birth to, and none of them could compare to her. The hall was deathly silent for a moment, but it didn't last for too long. In the end, old Madame Chu, who had experienced many storms, was still clearly aware that this wasn't the time to haggle over the matter. Her gaze was like a knife scraping the little girl in front of her. Since you've already said this much, then state your conditions. If we can satisfy you, our Chu family will have no objections. Finally hearing the words of the head of the Chu family, Chu Qingyan was relieved, but she didn't show it on her face. Aunt, you're treating me like an outsider. But as the saying goes, even blood brothers have to settle accounts clearly. Otherwise, they won't even know that they've stabbed each other in the back. So forgive Qingyan for being disrespectful. Hearing Chu Qingyan's words, old Madame Chu and the others were so angry that they almost spat blood. Qingyan has two conditions. First, the matter of my father returning to the genealogy must be completed within a month. Second, the Chu family must treat my parents well, and not make things difficult for them or embezzle. I wonder if uncle and auntie are able to do these two simple things? Chu Qingyan smiled as she looked up at the people on the main seat. Old Master Chu and old Madame Chu looked at each other and finally nodded. No problem. As long as you wait to get married peacefully, and don't bring calamity to the Chu family, the Chu family will definitely not treat your parents unfairly. Having received their promise, Chu Qingyan smiled slightly, but didn't immediately agree. Instead, she swept her gaze over the crowd. Uncle, aunt, in order to let the young lady of the Chu family avoid calamity, you pushed Qingyan into the fire pit. Logically speaking, we don't owe your Chu family anything. Instead, you owe our family of 3. Since we're from the same roots, there's no need to be so anxious to kill each other. Qingyan will accept this loss. But if in the future, Qingyan finds out that you didn't fulfill your promise, then even if I have to fight to the death, I won't let the Chu family off so easily. This obviously still had a childish tone, but no one in the Chu family dared to look down on her. Because tonight, this 10-year-old girl had already used her words and actions to prove her ability. Her ability was enough to make the Chu family helpless against her. When Chu Qingyan left gracefully with her parents, the Chu family looked as if they had eaten a fly. Father, mother, did you notice that this Chu Qingyan doesn't look like a 10-year-old girl at all? Seeing that they had left, Madame Wang immediately came over and prepared to speak after the fact. Unfortunately, old Madame Chu wasn't in a good mood and said unhappily, "Do you think that I can't tell because I'm old? This Chu Qingyan definitely isn't a good person. You all better be more alert and don't provoke her for no reason. When she marries into the residence of the King of England, our Chu family can truly rest easy. Understand?" Yes. Madame Wang shut her mouth in embarrassment. Madame Xing rolled her eyes at Madame Wang. She really was an idiot. At this time, the smartest thing to do was to not provoke the old madame's anger. It would be strange if she didn't get scolded by her. In the dark, Hualing looked thoughtfully in the direction that Chu Qingyan's family of 3 had left. Chapter 19. Chu Qingyan exited the hall and returned to her parents' residence. She heaved a huge sigh of relief, and her heart was filled with a sense of relief. This was a feeling that she had never experienced in a debate in her previous life. On the competition stage, although the debate was intense, people would know when to stop. Just now, not only was it a debate without gunpowder, but it was also a battle of life and death. If she was not careful, she could have been consigned to eternal damnation. Fortunately, she did not lose, and she even managed to come back from the dead in the most difficult situation, winning a round and obtaining protection for her parents. Seeing this, Chu Qian's mother immediately patted her on the back with a pitiful look. "It's all my fault for being useless. I had to rely on you." Chu Qingyan turned back and showed the most sincere smile of the night to comfort her mother. "Mother, don't worry. Your daughter has grown up and can protect you and father. So don't worry and trouble your daughter. Your daughter is your sweetest burden." Chu Qian's mother was moved. She stroked her daughter's increasingly bright face and nodded with a choked voice. Chu Qian's father surrounded the mother and daughter with a joyful smile. Because of tonight's farce, Chu Qingyan thought that old Madame Chu and the others would not harass them again, so she stayed in her parents' room with peace of mind. Chu Qian's mother wrung a cotton cloth and wiped her husband's cheeks. Then she turned her head and asked her daughter, who was sewing clothes in front of the candlelight, "Kai Kai, there's something I don't understand. Why didn't you agree when they proposed to let your father return to the family tree? Instead, you proposed it at the end. What's the difference?" Hearing her mother's question, Chu Qingyan put down the needle and thread in her hand and smiled faintly in the warm candlelight. "Mother, do you think they will really fulfill this request when they first proposed it? It's just an expedient measure to fool us. What I want is for them to be convinced and not dare to play any tricks. Now, I'm the life-saving straw they have to rely on. At first, they wanted to substitute one person for another, but unfortunately, they chose the wrong person. I'm not a little sheep, but a little fox in rabbit's skin." As she spoke, Chu Qingyan mischievously revealed her white teeth to her parents who were cuddling under the candlelight, making biting motions. Chu Qian's mother could not help but laugh at her daughter's childish actions. Chu Qian's father thought it was fun. After wiping his face, he also jumped in front of his daughter and copied her actions. The two happily competed whose teeth were more like wolf's teeth. The warm firelight danced happily in the room, infecting the courtyard's coldness. This scene happened to be seen by the guards stationed outside the courtyard. "Lord Hualing, did we fail to perform our duty tonight? His Highness clearly asked us to help the Chu family's young miss escape. But not only did we fail to protect her, we even exposed her escape plan. Shouldn't we apologize to His Highness?" The black-clothed guard asked hesitantly. Hua Ling's gaze moved away from the yellow windowsill and his lips curled. "Lord wanted us to escort her away. He didn't say we would help her escape. Moreover, her plan was full of mistakes and would have been discovered sooner or later. It has nothing to do with us." The black-clothed man looked at him. "Lord Hualing, you don't want Chu family's young miss to leave the Chu family at all, right?" Hualing's thoughts had been seen through, so he no longer hid it. He snorted and said, "That's right. Do you want Lord to get married without a bride? Do you want Lord to become the joke of the entire Sichuan again?" The black-clothed man immediately shook his head. "That's right." Hualing's gaze fell on the windowsill again. He could faintly see that small and thin voice. Disdain flashed in his eyes. "Although this Chu family's little girl is still young, she's not stupid. It's better than nothing. I don't want to see Lord being controlled by those people because of his marriage." The black-clothed man fell silent, seeming to empathize with him. Hualing nodded in satisfaction when there was no sound beside him. It seemed that his brainwashing was very successful. "Chu Qingyan, I don't know if you can live past the wedding, but in these few years, you can't leave the capital." Hualing's eyes turned cold. One of the benefits of having a showdown with the Chu family was that her parents' meals improved. They moved out of that dilapidated courtyard and lived in a renovated one. She also obtained the convenience of going out. This was an opportunity that she had obtained after pestering old Madame Chu for an entire morning. The purpose of going out was not only to familiarize herself with the capital and see the culture of the ancient capital. Most importantly, it was to find a doctor for her father. This time Shan Cha accompanied them. Madame Xing even sent a few strong coachmen to accompany them. Chu Qingyan knew to protect them, but she was actually monitoring them. The Chu family was still afraid that they would take the opportunity to escape, but Chu Qingyan didn't care. Ever since Shan Cha betrayed them last time, she spoke very little. However, Chu Qingyan didn't care. It had nothing to do with her who chose what path. Besides, she never treated Shan Cha as her confidant. So when Shan Cha came out to testify, she didn't have any other emotions other than being a little surprised. Going out was a new experience for Father Chu, especially when he saw the street full of snacks and desserts. Father Chu ran even faster. Chu Qingyan originally wanted to bring him to see a doctor, but she didn't expect that she could only helplessly chase after him. Bang! Father Chu's eyes lit up when he saw the sugar-coated haws. He didn't see the people walking towards him. He only had eyes for the sugar-coated haws, As he ran forward, he bumped into someone. Fortunately, Father Chu's body was still there. He only took a few steps back and happened to be in front of Chu Qingyan, who was rushing towards him. Chu Qingyan held her forehead helplessly. Father was too impatient. However, the most important thing now was to see if he was injured. After checking, Chu Qingyan remembered that her father had hurt innocent people just now. She immediately turned to look. She saw 4 or 5 men wearing bamboo hats standing in front of her. The man in the lead was dressed in a black robe. He stood with his hands behind his back and was tall. She had to raise her head to see the black gauze curtain. With just one look, she knew that this person was their master. The black robe was of high quality. A pair of slender fingers that looked like the moon god's favor were exposed from the cuffs embroidered with golden threads. He was tall and slender. Although she couldn't see his face, it reminded Chu Qingyan of a poem. There was a bandit gentleman who cut, polished and polished. Just as Chu Qingyan was sizing him up, the man also noticed her. Under the bamboo hat, his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Chu Qingyan, who wanted to continue looking, faintly met the pair of eyes under the black gauze. She couldn't help but be startled. What a pair of sharp eyes! That sharp gaze made people feel fear. She quickly lowered her head. Just now, she clearly saw that when her father was about to bump into this person, the servant beside him had already stepped forward to shield him. Besides, these people were tall and strong, so it shouldn't be a problem. Thus, Chu Qingyan quickly pulled her father aside and apologized in a low voice. Then, she immediately pulled him towards her mother's direction. However, she didn't see her father squinting at the man in front of him suspiciously. This person, he looks like he's an inverted scallion. The low murmur was drowned out by the crowd and the sugar-coated haws. Chapter 20. Father, what did you say? Chu Qingyan bought a stick of candied hawthorn from the cellar and handed it to her father. She then remembered what her father had said earlier and couldn't help but tilt her head and ask. Unfortunately, at this time, her father only had eyes for the candied hawthorn. How could he care about what she asked? No, her father still had her mother in his eyes. Look, her father had already taken the stick of candied hawthorn and ran to find her mother. Chu Qingyan shook her head and smiled helplessly. She suddenly remembered the people she had met on the street and couldn't help but turn her head to look. Unfortunately, the crowd was bustling and she couldn't see the outstanding person anymore. Just as Chu Qingyan turned her head to continue walking, the person in luxurious black clothing stood under the tree, looking in her direction with cold eyes. A light breeze blew, blowing up a corner of the black veil, and the silver luster on the side of his face faintly shone under the sunlight. Lord, that little girl is the Chu clan's young miss. A subordinate followed his master's gaze and immediately reported. Xiao Su replied indifferently. He already recognized her without the subordinate's reminder. She was the girl who had saved him in Mao village and accidentally became his betrothed. She wasn't tall, not even reaching his chest. She still had a childish air to her, and when she smiled, she revealed 2 small canine teeth and shallow dimples. It was no wonder that Xiao Su could see her so clearly, whether it was when he saved her in Mao village, or when he accidentally met her in the Chu clan. He had never seen this girl in broad daylight. He was still somewhat curious about this courageous, intelligent, and cautious little girl. However, while he was curious, he did not pay too much attention to Chu Qingyan. From what he knew, Chu Qingyan would leave his line of sight very soon. That was because she would eventually leave the Chu clan and escape this engagement. Master, it seems that the Chu clan's surveillance of this young miss is getting tighter and tighter. The subordinate couldn't help but say in surprise. Xiao Su raised his head and looked around. Sure enough, he saw several servants wearing the Chu clan's clothes hiding in the crowd. This shoddy tracking technique could deceive Chu Qingyan and the others, but it couldn't escape his eyes. Where is the fire spirit? Xiao Su frowned. Logically speaking, old Master Chu was about to celebrate his birthday, and Chu Qingyan should be secretly preparing to escape. How could she be in the mood to go shopping? Moreover, there were so many people following her. If the Chu family was not suspicious of her, then her plan had been exposed. Only Hualing knew what was going on. As soon as his voice fell, Hualing was already summoned over. Hualing smiled unnaturally at Lord. He thought that Lord didn't notice that something was wrong just now, so he could escape. Who knew that he would be pulled back before he could go far? Lord. Reason. Before Hualing could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Xiao Su's cold words. Hualing rubbed his nose, not daring to hide anything as he explained everything in detail. After Xiao Su heard this, his eyes fell on Hualing. It was like 1,000-pound stone was pressing down on Hualing, making him unable to move. Hualing, you disobeyed this king's orders? Although it was a question, there was a certain tone to it. Hualing immediately knelt down. Lord, this subordinate did not stop it because of you. Xiao Su looked at the stubborn Hualing kneeling on the ground and closed his eyes. Finally he slowly said, Don't do it again. Hualing stood up and then carefully raised his head to ask, Lord, then now? I'm afraid it's not a question of whether she wants to escape or not, but that she no longer has a chance. From what Hualing had told him about the confrontation between Chu Qingyan and the Chu clan, he had already guessed that Chu Qingyan's strategy was to cut off all means of retreat and sink all boats. He really could not tell that this was a strategy that a 10-year-old girl could come up with, and it really surprised him. But it was hard to tell if this girl could safely live until the day of her wedding. Xiao Su felt pity for her in his heart. The Chu family framed her and caused her to walk into a whirlpool. And because of him, she might be consigned to eternal damnation in the future. You said that she wants to find a doctor for her father? Xiao Su asked. Yes, Lord, I heard that she wants to cure her father's illness. But it has been more than 10 years, and in this subordinate's opinion, this matter is very uncertain. Hualing did not hide his disapproval of Chu Qingyan's decision. If there's a chance, recommend divine physician Luo to her. But do it secretly and don't let her find out. If he could make it up to her now, then it would be. Hualing's eyes widened as he looked at Lord in disbelief. Did he hear wrongly? This was the first time he saw Lord being so concerned about a girl. And it was such a young girl. Could it be that Lord suffered some stimulation outside the city? Did he become a pedophile? Although he didn't want Chu Qingyan to run away from the wedding, because he didn't want to embarrass Lord and let the bride run away. Now that he saw his master protecting Chu Qingyan, Hualing felt a little upset. How was this little girl worthy of his master whom he respected so much? Compared to Hualing's messy thoughts, Xiao Su had already turned around and left indifferently. He didn't know that his subordinate's heart was in turmoil. On the other hand, Chu Qingyan found out the address of a divine physician under the guidance of a passerby and immediately brought her parents to trace it back. Until they stopped in front of a shabby stall. May I ask if you are the miraculous divine physician Zhu? Although she had doubts in her heart, Chu Qingyan still asked respectfully, Divine physician, you're calling me? The gray-robed man, who had his back to them and was immersed in something, immediately raised his head and revealed a shifty-eyed face. Chu Qingyan was frightened by his sudden action and retreated. She immediately recovered her calm expression and replied with a smile, Yes, divine physician, this junior is calling you. Seeing Chu Qingyan like this, the man happily stroked the mustache above his lips and asked with a shifty smile, That's right, divine physician Zhu is this one. I don't know if little miss is doing divination or fortune-telling. Divination? Fortune-telling? Chu Qingyan was stunned. This scene changed too quickly, and she couldn't immediately react. Why did asking for medical treatment become fortune-telling? That's right. If it's fortune-telling, it's drawing lots. If it's fortune-telling, it's directly stretching out your palm. But no matter which one it is, this divine physician can guarantee that it will be flawless. Little miss, do you want to have your fortune told, or do you want to have it told for your family of 3? I'll give you a discount and treat it as the price for the 2 of you. How about it? This divine physician is very compassionate. This divine physician is a fortune teller within a radius of 100 miles. You should know that revealing the secrets of heaven will shorten your lifespan. This divine physician is risking his life to tell your fortune. After saying that, this man had an impassioned and self-sacrificing look, causing Father Chu to divert a bit of his attention from the candied hawthorn to look at him. Aren't you a doctor who treats patients? Why are you in the fortune-telling business? Chu Qingyan pursed her lips. Could it be that the doctors nowadays had a side job of fortune-telling? My surname is Zhu and I'm called Divine Physician. That's right. Little miss, I didn't say that I'm Divine Physician, because I'm called Divine Physician. Chu Qingyan facepalmed. So she had met an unreliable swindler. Pig, your nose has 2 holes. Pig, your ears are so big. You can't hear me scolding you for being stupid even if I flap my fan. At this moment, Father Chu's joyful off-key singing drifted over with the wind. Chu Qingyan silently turned her eyes away. Chapter 21. After ascertaining that the divine doctor wasn't divine Dr. Zhu, Chu Qingyan held her forehead and left with her parents, ignoring divine Dr. Zhu's persuasion to stay. Chu Qingyan chuckled. No wonder those coachmen from the Chu family had a strange smile on their faces when they knew that she was looking for divine Dr. Zhu. So they already knew who divine Dr. Zhu was. From the looks of it, even though she had laid her cards on the table with the Chu family was still indifferent towards her and had a wait-and-see attitude. But Chu Qingyan wasn't disappointed, as she didn't expect the Chu family to be of any help in this matter. At this moment, Father Chu was holding Mother Chu's hand as they walked happily in front, ignoring the gazes of the surrounding people. Mother Chu only cared about Father Chu and ignored the strange gazes of the others. Chu Qingyan felt a faint pity in her heart. The relationship between her parents was still as deep as in the modern era. If her father could regain his consciousness, then everything would be even better. She didn't know when that marriage decree would be fulfilled. No matter what, she had to find a doctor who could treat her father's illness as soon as possible. Otherwise she wouldn't be able to sleep well. Everything that happened to Chu Qingyan was transmitted to Xiao Su's ears. There wasn't any ripple on his face as he tapped on the inner wall of the carriage and asked his subordinate outside, "Where is Divine Dr. Luo now?" Reporting to Master, "Ever since Divine Physician Luo left the palace 3 months ago, we have not been able to find any traces of him. This subordinate will send people to closely search for his whereabouts these few days." A respectful voice came from outside. Xiao Su hummed in agreement. "Master, we will be entering the palace in another instance's time." When Xiao Su heard that, his indifferent gaze landed on the slightly swaying carriage curtains. The wind blew and the familiar street scenery leaped into his eyes. His thoughts slowly drifted away. 1 year, he hadn't stepped foot in this place for an entire year. But it was a pity that even though he was far away, those people had never thought of stopping. A smear of ridicule flashed past that pair of black glazed eyes. It was as fast as a gust of wind, and it was hidden in the depths of the black glazed eyes. When one looked at it seriously, that pair of beautiful eyes were calm and no emotions could be seen. "His Royal Highness, the Empress has been waiting for you for several days. Yesterday, she even smashed a set of blue and white porcelain tea set. Today, you're finally here. Don't be as stubborn as before. If you make the Empress angry again, I'm afraid that it won't just be a set of tea set." Xiao Su had just stepped into Chaoyang Palace when an elderly palace servant came up to greet him with joy, but there was clear disapproval in her words. Hua Ling looked at this palace servant, and her eyebrows jumped. This palace servant was called Luo Yin. She was the happiness of Empress Liang's side. Since Empress Liang was born, she had been by her side. She could be considered Empress Liang's wet nurse. In Empress Liang's heart, her position was not low. Therefore, this Luo Yin often relied on Empress Liang's favor and frequently spoke rudely to their lord. She did not have the self-awareness of being a servant. If it wasn't for Empress Liang's face, with their lord's personality, this person would have died countless times already. Xiao Su furrowed his brows. Even though he disliked her preaching every time they met, she was still someone that Mu Empress valued. Xiao Su looked at her, and after giving a slight nod, he strode into Chaoyang Palace. Luo Yin was shocked by His Royal Highness' faint glance just now, and her legs couldn't help but feel weak. After not seeing for a year, His Royal Highness' personality had become even colder. Without thinking too much, Luo Yin immediately followed His Royal Highness' steps. Xiao Su had just stepped into the inner hall when an unknown object flew in front of him. He furrowed his brows but did not move. The white object brushed past the corner of his brow. With a purring sound, it hit the doorpost behind him and exploded. If it had been just a little bit more, it would have hit his head. Xiao didn't know if he should be happy or unlucky. The teacup didn't hit its target, making the attacker very impatient. A gloomy female voice came from the center of the hall. You still know to return to the palace? Ben Gong thought that you had been playing around outside for the past year, and that Ben Gong didn't exist in your eyes at all. In the main hall of Chaoyang Palace, a woman in a flowery palace dress sat on a deep purple and delicately carved chaise lounge. The outside was covered with a layer of golden gauze. The hem of her dress was embroidered with phoenixes flapping their wings. Her makeup was exquisite, and her face was beautiful. However, her two thin eyebrows were furrowed and her eyes were filled with anger. I don't dare. Xiao didn't become emotional because of the censure of the person in front of him. He stood in place with his head slightly lowered, and his face expressionless. Don't dare? Haha. Is there anything in this world that you don't dare to do? The person sitting on the chaise lounge was none other than Xiao's biological mother, the Empress of Sichuan Kingdom. At this time, her eyes were filled with ridicule, and her tone was exaggerated. Ben Gong has urged and invited you many times, but I still can't summon you back. No wonder the outside world always says that you are unpredictable and cold. It seems that it's not false at all. Even Ben Gong, your mother, can't influence your decisions. You really are Ben Gong's good son. In the face of Empress Ai's sarcasm, Xiao only moved his eyes and then asked faintly, Empress Mother, if you're only looking for me to say this, then I will take my leave first. Stop. What's with your attitude? Before she could finish speaking, her son was about to leave. Empress Liang was so angry that she almost couldn't breathe. Luo Yin immediately stepped forward and gently patted Empress Liang's back, telling her to calm down. At the same time, she rebuked Xiao. His Royal Highness, it's not easy for you to come back. Don't make Her Imperial Highness angry again. When Xiao heard this, he didn't want to stay a moment longer. He was about to leave when he heard the person behind him say angrily, Xiao, this time, Ben Gong doesn't care what you think in your heart. No matter what, you have to break off this engagement with the Chu clan. Otherwise, Ben Gong will no longer recognize you as a son. Xiao thought it was a bit funny. Hearing Empress Mother say this, it seemed like he was forcing the marriage alliance with the Chu clan. When Empress Mother mentioned the reason for summoning him back to the palace, Xiao turned to look at her with a calm expression. Empress Mother, I'm afraid that I can't make the decision on this matter. The Chu clan was chosen by Imperial Grandfather, and the marriage alliance was bestowed by Imperial Father. If you have any objections, you can tell Imperial Father. No matter what you discuss with Imperial Father, I won't have any objections. Empress Liang had already argued with Sichuan Emperor about this matter. If it weren't for the fact that she had no other choice, how could she have gotten so angry? When she saw that this son of hers didn't care at all, she was even angrier. When she saw his current attitude, Empress Liang became even angrier. Xiao, look at yourself. You don't fight, and you don't resist? Do you think you can get away with this? Ben Gong is telling you, that's completely impossible. Relying on Ai's current glory to fight for and resist. Xiao pointed at the mask on his face as he spoke in a mocking tone. Empress Liang's gaze landed on the silver mask. Her eyes flashed, and she gave a cold humph. So what if you're disfigured? You're my Liang Yuan's only son and Sichuan's eldest son. All of this belongs to you. As long as you work hard, Empress Mother will support you. What are you afraid of? Xiao looked at his mother, whose face was distorted by desire. He pursed his lips, but didn't say anything. Empress Liang thought that he had tacitly agreed and continued. Don't worry. If you can't cancel the marriage, it's fine. Dead people can't get married. Empress Mother has a way. Xiao felt that the life of intrigue in the inner palace had completely distorted Empress Mother's mentality. In front of others, she was dignified and virtuous, tolerant and magnanimous.